everybody. How's it going? Thanks for coming back and joining me for episode 162 of Evolving with Cory Kastle. I'm Cory Kastle, and man, I'm just
I can plug this mine.
yeah. I just I'm just feeling like a silly goose today, and maybe I'm due for being a silly goose. And I've got a guest on today who is in all the same stuff I'm into, and I figure if I'm going to be a silly goose with somebody, and it's somebody who I'm just meeting, might as well be you, Bob Kaplan.
How you doing? I'm actually really glad we were just talking that I haven't listened before, because I had no idea why I was hitting a bongo. And I'm like, did this guy maybe like dose me with something? And like, I'm about to like enter a trip, and the bongo is like my initial,
the audio trigger.
Yeah.
Auditory.
I don't know. It made me think of scenes in movies where somebody's like, when it hits them, they're like, I just picture like the bongo just being my like, boom, boom.
Yeah. It'll hit you. That's when you know. That's when you know the shrooms kick in.
Yeah. But yeah, it's funny. We have. It's weird. Like we were just talking like about how, once again we kind of cross paths without crossing paths.
Right.
And my mutual friend Mark Mackner. I just did a film with him, Daisy Durkins 3. It's called Daisy Durkins and the Dinosaur Apocalypse.
Right.
And Nick Burke was in it with me, and Nikolai Volkov's last film, by the way.
Yeah.
And I got to get choked by a WWE Hall of Famer.
Yeah. So
that was definitely. It's one of those things that I think I actually did have on my bucket list, was getting choked by a Hall of Famer. And
it's so specific.
Yeah.
It's such a specific thing to have.
Well, I trained for about a year.
Okay.
And if I was in my 20s still, I would have kept going with the wrestling. Mm-hmm. But like being 33 now, and it's like I think 1 year and I had about 5 injuries. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I'm glad I gave it a shot.
Where were you training?
I was originally at Chikara.
Huh?
And then I ended up going to a smaller place in Delaware. I think it was called Asylum at the time.
Okay.
And I was just there
like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, they're really cool guys. They're really down to earth.
Well, I only knew because they did a thing completely it doesn't even matter. Mm-hmm. But it was just a different like organization. It wasn't those Asylum guys, but it was at that building.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well,
so
they're like when I was training with them, it was in like a shipping container, like a storage locker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was some random warehouse.
Yeah. It's amazing like where this life takes you, where it's like you go to like a storage locker to wrestle, and then I show up, I take an Uber here, I'm like, I have no idea where I am. Like, I'm about to meet someone for the first time. It's just like, I feel like most normal people have red flags with stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's just like, oh, I'm gonna show up at this wrestling gym. Oh, I'm in some type of storage locker place. I'm actually fenced in. Like maybe I should leave.
Do you have any like hell gig stories, like for like when you do stand-up comedy, when you do anything like that, like anything where you're like, all right, this isn't right, but I'm going here anyway to do it?
I feel like, that's just kind of comedy in general.
Yeah.
Well, oh God, yeah, there was this place in Bartow. Now, I think if you look up Bartow, what you'll find is it's kind of a town, but not really.
Right.
And it was that was my first. So like, I did stand up when I was a kid, and I was just a kid doing jokes, and then I got older and I tried it, and I still didn't know what I was doing. And I really say that my career started when I started opening for Bob Levy. Mm-hmm. And the first gig I did with that promoter was at Bartow. And this is a place where I was one of the only people there with teeth. And it was, at least they gave you free drinks, I think, at that one.
Teeth are overrated at this place.
But it was middle of nowhere. it was weird. And then it turned into like a or like a dance party afterwards. And I remember the promoter dancing with this girl, and she was definitely missing teeth that one. That was weird.
You don't need teeth to dance.
No, and you don't need teeth to do a lot of things, I feel like. Right. Mick Foley will tell you that. How many is he missing at this point?
I don't know. No idea.
I remember when he lost his teeth live. I thought it was really cool. Where he was bleeding out of his
The
mouth.
Hell in a Cell.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was what. Not that Hell in a Cell. The first Hell in a Cell is what like hooked me into being a wrestling fan. And that was a match I watched back like hundreds of times back then.
So we're probably around the same age.
Yeah, I'm 36.
36. Okay. Yeah. So like the thing is, a lot of people our age are wrestling fans because that's what was great.
Yeah.
I mean, like, there's so much stuff out there now because there's YouTube and podcasts and TV and you got stuff like UFC out there too. But wrestling was so much bigger when we were younger because there wasn't other stuff.
Right.
I mean, people weren't doing live gaming. They were playing Mario on Super Nintendo. It's not like
so WWF was competing against WCW.
Yeah.
But now WWE is competing with anything else and everything else. Video game channels.
I was always team WCW.
Yeah.
DDP. I'm gonna meet DDP at Monster Mania next month.
Okay.
But I do DDP yoga, and he changed my life in more ways than one because he was always my favorite wrestler, and then he becomes this self-help guru and motivational speaker and fitness guru. So it's like I feel like DDP yoga. I mean, it's helped me in so many ways. It's helped me, get my life in order and really become physically healthier and mentally healthier. But man, I don't know. It's just like when WCW first came out, it was like it was like the all-stars of wrestling. I mean, you had Hulk Hogan and you had Sting and you had DDP. I mean, all the great guys, went over there. And that's when I would say I was into it the most in like, maybe high school. And I was like, in WCW, Ric Flair, Nature Boy. But when it was, I feel like it was really in its prime. But Ninja Turtles mug. Thank you.
Dude, the Monday Night Wars were like the reason to be excited about, about being a fan.
Yeah.
To have other. Even though it was kind of popular back then, it was still very niche. You know what I mean? It was still very like you were lucky to find friends who would also like it. Like it was still not been widely talked about.
And it wasn't the cool kids in high school.
No, not at all.
Like you wouldn't talk to anybody cool. It was like that weird guy over there in the corner. He's the one I'm going to talk to you about last night's pay-per-view.
Right.
But I don't know. It's funny because as a filmmaker, I feel like I don't like working with actors. Okay. And I prefer to work with comedians and professional wrestlers.
Well, I am both of those things.
Yeah. Well, it's like, for instance, I mean, comedians and wrestlers are great at improv.
Right.
A lot when I was doing the sketch comedy channel, I really didn't like scripts because I like to, do everything more improv. A lot of even, Larry David, Curbing Enthusiasm, I mean, he barely writes anything.
Right.
It's just
a situation is there, and then he just kind of ad libs off.
Yeah, because and it was funny because we had Vivica Fox on. She was like, "Oh, this is really weird for me." And then Susie, it's her real name, Susie Green. She was saying like, as a comedian, I love doing this because I love improv. Right. And then also a big plus about pro wrestlers is you don't have to hire stunt performers because they can do their own stunts.
Right.
That was the last time I was wrestling was at CZW, and I bruised my ribs getting thrown, tossed. I don't know his because he's got two wrestling personas, but Tony Tiger was the one I was wrestling.
Oh yeah. I know him, Drew. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was wrestling him, and I think when I was getting thrown in the corner, I ended up hitting the ropes instead.
Evan Nemo was his other persona. Yeah.
And it was funny because the night I was in the ring with him, I think it was the day after he was like, I think he played Batista's bodyguard on Raw. And I'm like, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And that was the end of it for me because after bruising my ribs, it was like that. I think that was my last injury. And that was the worst because I couldn't breathe. I couldn't lay down. Everything I did hurt.
I just had Icarus in here from
really?
Chara. Yeah. Just came in here and hung out with me. That was a real cool chat.
Yeah.
Love that guy. It was Silly Goose.
So where can I put this as a?
Right here.
I respect wood.
Okay.
But it's funny because I brought this with me.
Oh yeah.
I thought.
Okay.
It's I was gonna have you
Half-Life
autograph
Horror
it,
from Hell.
but you mentioned that you haven't seen it yet.
Right, I have not seen it yet.
Because from my understanding, that's your first lead role, right?
I mean, it was the first featured, or I was like a primary role. Yeah,
I would say. I mean, you're like maybe the second lead in that. You and was a Christian was the other guy.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I never saw it.
Funny thing about Half-Life Horror from Hell, and Mark is going to praise me for mentioning it because he always says it's his best movie, and he feels like it's gotten the least attention.
Well, I mean, it just flew so under the radar.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about it, if you go on IMDb, and I found this out by accident, I think it's the 12th highest rated zombie movie on IMDb.
There's only one zombie in it.
Yeah, that's the funniest thing about it. I thought was that I brought a Sharpie if you want to autograph it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
But it had the one zombie. I remember I was looking up zombie movies on IMDb, and I'm scrolling, and the 12th one there was Half-Life Horror from Hell.
That's so funny. Well, I thought it was such a cool take on the fact that like the zombie, like the voodoo version of a zombie.
Yeah, and that's how it started. I mean, Romero created the zombie,
right?
The modern zombie.
Yeah,
and it was weird because I remember a few years ago when Zombie 1 died, and it was like the first ever zombie just died. And I mean, it shows you how new the genre is, and people don't realize where the genre came from. That it was originally, I mean, the zombie's really based on the golem, which goes back to Jewish folklore, which is biblical. And then it was voodoo or hoodoo. I get all those mixed up, but it was originally like black magic, and then it wasn't until I Am Legend, Richard Matheson's book, when modern horror was born, because he was the first one to bring scientific means behind horror, to have a scientific explanation. And before that, I mean, horror wasn't more about mysticism, and that's what modern horror does, because I think people nowadays want to believe, and they're not going to believe it unless you make it believable. So that's why, a lot of times zombies aren't really zombies. Like 28 Days Later, those really weren't zombies.
Right. Yeah.
They weren't dead or anything. And I think, and that's kind of what
sort of infected people.
Yeah. And that was the whole point of the original Romero, was there's no more room in hell and the dead will walk the earth.
Yeah.
And it happened from a meteor, the radioactive meteor created the zombies in the first one. But
what I loved about zombie movies as a kid was the different types of origins for how it happened.
I mean, look at Return of the Living Dead. That was genius.
Yeah.
Because they literally made a sequel to Night of the Living Dead without making a sequel.
Right. They're like, you asshole. What'd you do, you asshole? And he's like, yeah, you watch your mouth if you like this job.
That's one of those classic horror films that I can't stand. Return of the Living Dead.
You can't stand it?
Yeah, and I don't know what it is. I don't like how the zombies eat brains.
I love it. I love that they like talked.
Yeah, that's what I didn't like.
But only enough to like get smarter.
Yeah, send more cops and
send more paramedics. Yeah.
I like the third one.
Okay, I didn't see that.
Yeah, I vaguely remember the whole story, but it's basically a chick becomes a zombie and she's fully conscious, and it's a love story actually, and that's what I liked about it. And she ends up realizing that if she has to hurt herself to not want to eat her boyfriend. So the cover is very classic because she has all these sharp objects sticking out of her because she covered herself, put sharp objects all over her body so that she would be in pain constantly.
Okay.
And zombie romance is something else that's, I feel like, coming back. Because I remember the movie Zombie Honeymoon.
Okay.
I
don't know that one.
There's no way to not make it weird. Like every zombie, romance, except for what was the one? Warm Bodies.
Oh yeah, Warm Bodies. I saw that.
That wasn't weird. they usually get weirder than that. That was a good one, I thought. But I mean, yeah, I mean, there's nothing obviously I love more than horror. And I did a film, Dollface, Road to the Apocalypse, and that ended up becoming very more popular than I ever thought it would be. And I didn't want zombies, because the way I came up with Dollface was I was watching Tank Girl in the middle of the night, and I said, wouldn't it be cool if she was fighting zombies? But my whole thing about it was I didn't want zombies. I wanted zombie-esque. But there was a film. So you're familiar with The Asylum, right? They make mockbusters. So when I'm trying to think of some titles, like when Transformers came out, they made Transmorphers.
Okay.
When Snakes in a Plane came out, they made Snakes in a Train. They're also now very famous for Sharknado.
Okay.
But yeah, that's the studio.
What was Sharknado a spoof of?
It's not. That was the crazy thing.
So like it was like Weird Al Yankovic decided to make an original.
Exactly.
Song.
Yeah. and it paid off, because that's ended up becoming a huge franchise.
Yeah, it was like they put a few like names in it.
Yeah.
And then
like the sequels, like off. People would start popping up.
Right.
I only watched the first one.
I didn't see any of them.
When I first saw the first one, I'm like, this is genius. And now they got other stuff, Stone NATO, Clown NATO. I mean, everybody else is everybody's making mockbusters of the mockbuster people. Like, it's funny because you got other people trying to piggyback now. But so yeah, the Asylum did a film called I Am Omega, which was a mockbuster of I Am Legend. And my director thought I was nuts when he asked me for inspiration. I put that on the list. And it was because in that they had these mutated freaks with bony protrusions and stuff. And that's what I wanted to go for. Problem is would have been very expensive. So we ended up going for green skin and boils and stuff like that, and green blood. And basically the way, it's always great when you have a low budget and you can incorporate that into the story and say, oh no, it's because they're not evolved yet. And as they evolve, they'll get, they'll get more disgusting, and simultaneously we'll have more money to do it too. But yeah, so that's how it started. And then I was trying to do something different after that, because a lot of people thought I was a one-trick pony, because they're like, I had somebody say, oh, I really don't want to work on this project with Bob, because Dollface was much more comedic and I want to do serious horror. And I don't think there needs to be a distinction. Like, I think horror is horror. I think it'd be funny or it could be scary.
Right.
And so I ended up trying to do something a little serious, and I basically bounced around, started projects, and they didn't really go anywhere until I started working on something that was going to be a little more like Dollface, because I'm like, you know what, fuck it. If everybody thinks I'm a one-trick pony, well, fuck them.
Right.
And then I just fell onto this web series.
How many tricks can ponies actually even do in real life?
You know what? I've never broken down the expression.
Let's think about this expression. How many times do you see ponies?
Well, yeah, what is
pulling off many tricks?
Well, their bodies aren't like dogs. Dogs can do a lot of things.
What can a pony count? They count, and then
ponies are less useful than horses.
No,
you can't really ride
they're
them.
Just they're little compact horses.
It'd be funny, like someone like me on a horse. I mean, on a pony, because I'm sure my feet would be touching the ground. Like, would it even move? But
like donkey rides.
But yeah, I mean, I came up with the idea in September, and I've been trying to hash it out since. And like we talked about Nick Burke, he's going to be in it. So I the first scene Nick's in, he's picking his nose, and the part was obviously written for him.
Yeah.
But it's called Most Likely to Die. And I star as a guy who peaked in high school, who basically ends up pissing off a satanic cult and then has to fight for his life.
Okay.
And so I basically
you guys already filmed this?
We're in the casting phase right now. Okay. Next will be locations. Then we're going to end up shooting. We're going to shoot the first 2 episodes together. That way I can either treat it as a web series, or I can put them together and treat it as a TV pilot.
Okay.
So, a lot of people, when I say, oh, it's about a guy who peaked in high school and he works at it, well, they're like, is this autobiographical? I'm like, I wish I peaked in high school. I was weird in high school.
Yeah. It's funny. I talked about cancel culture, and I was like, to be canceled, would you have to be someone first?
Yeah.
And it's like, Oh, to peak in high school, wouldn't you have had to peak already? Like, oh, I've never even come close to peaking. I don't know.
I feel like I peaked in college, but
I don't think I don't believe in the idea of peaking because, like, dude, there's still so much life left.
Well, that's kind of the message behind my web series, because there's really three things about it that I think are very powerful, even though it's a horror comedy. Is one, it's about finding your purpose in life.
Mhm.
Because he thought that his purpose was to be great in high school, and then he died.
Mhm.
The legend died, and then he finds a new purpose in life where he's really good at killing Satanists.
Mhm.
So there's that, and then there's the human spirit, like what a human being is capable of when you take away everything. My favorite TV show is from 1967, The Prisoner, and it was about a spy in a village, and the village was a prison, and they were trying to break him, and he was trying to beat them, and he was trying to escape. And it shows you that when you take away everything, even someone's identity, that the only thing left they're able to do is fight.
Mhm.
So that's one aspect of it too. And then the third part is don't underestimate people, because just because someone's bald and fat in his 30s doesn't mean he will not kill an entire cult of Satanists.
Okay. I mean, look, there's a message to be said about not judging anyone.
Yeah.
That has to do with that, really. I mean, you're never fully able to understand what someone's capable of.
Yeah.
No matter how well they're put together or how unwell they're put together. Like, you don't like. Did you watch remember Ruckus in CZW?
Oh yeah.
Like, you would have never thought that dude would be doing those flips.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why my favorite wrestler is Kevin Owens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because he just looks like a dude.
Yeah,
and I hate how when people say bad things about him and they say good things about him, they say the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that he doesn't look like a wrestler and he's overweight and all this. And I'm like, why does that matter?
Right.
What Kevin Owens can do in the ring is incredible.
Right.
I mean, for anyone, not to mention a guy who was a little overweight.
Right.
But I always liked him because he just looks like a dude.
Right. He plays the emotional strings that he needs to play.
One of the best heels, I think, in WWE history.
He's a great talker.
Mm. And English is not his first language.
Right. Yeah. He's a great talker for someone whose first language is French. Yeah.
And he learned English by watching WWE.
Right.
I think it was JR. I think he said was like the biggest thing. The commentators is how he learned English.
Yeah. I can't even put myself in his shoes on that. Like, I don't know.
I spent
confusing.
2 years studying Spanish
Mm-hmm.
In college because, Westchester University thinks that English majors need to be proficient in the second language in order to better understand the English language. I don't agree, but I did it anyway. But then after it's been 5 years since I graduated from Westchester, I don't think I remember any of it because I didn't I didn't practice.
Right.
So it's like, when and especially the older you are, the harder it is to learn a language when, the longer you've been speaking one language. So it's like, I think that's incredible for anyone who's bilingual.
Right. Yeah. It takes an incredible amount of intelligence.
Yeah.
It's like you compartmentalize certain things and what language do you think in?
Yeah, and I was asking somebody that the other day because somebody at my work who was born a native Spanish speaker, and now and I think she was 6 when she moved to America, and she doesn't even have an accent. And I was asking her because she said she thinks in English, and Spanish was her first language. Because I was saying too, if you're a native speaker of Spanish, when you hear Spanish, you hear Spanish.
Right.
But when I hear Spanish, I have to translate it to English in my mind.
Right.
So it's like I don't just, I don't think
it's like second nature, man.
Yeah.
I think when I'm telling people in wrestling, I'm trying to teach them wrestling. I'm like, we're going against our nature.
Yeah. Well, that's the craziest thing about wrestling is that your entire life, you're told to not fall down.
Right. Your instincts want to kick in and you've got to make your second nature be unnatural, unfamiliar with what you already know. And I'm sure that's what like a language, like learning another language or learning to play an instrument. Like I have a guitar, I don't know how to play it.
Yeah, I always wanted, and that's funny because I became a comedian because I always wanted to be a rock star, but never had any musical talent. So it's like, you know, I made do with what I could. I couldn't play the guitar, but I could tell dick jokes.
Well, you know, that's an instrument.
I feel like that's like the foundation of my entire, you know, act is, you know, the penis being an instrument.
Right.
But yeah, so like where I struggled was I could not do a front flip because I was trying to do a flip bump. And I couldn't do it. And it was, I remember Solo Darling and Sonny Lafarge were trying to teach me. And I just couldn't get myself to fall forward.
Okay.
And front bumps were very hard for me because it's like, you know, you tell yourself your entire life, don't fall. And if you fall, don't fall forward. And if you fall backwards, land on your shoulder, not flat on your back. So it's like, you know, like you said, it's like your instincts, like with wrestling, you have to forget at them all.
Right.
And, because even as a stuntman, when I fall, I land on my shoulder because I soften the blow.
Right.
But, you know, the camera is able to help me with that. When you're in front of a live audience in the middle of a ring, you can't do
There's
that.
no take two.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Oh, I remember once I almost broke my wrist doing a stunt. Because my dumbass, we choreographed it, and then I decided to shoot all the scenes and then go back and do it again. And the stunt choreographer wasn't there anymore. So she kept messing up and throwing me forward. Once again, instincts. I kept catching myself with my hands.
Dude, did you see the Kane Hodder documentary?
Is it Unmasked?
No, it's like Through Hell and Back or something like that. I
don't know. I think I watched something with him. Kane Hodder is one of my favorite people in the world.
Dude, you should watch the documentary. I think it's called like Through Hell and Back. I think it's called that.
He had a reality show too.
It's the story of him, like him telling you the story of when he got all the burns.
Oh God, yeah, I've heard him tell the story.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I was like automatically watching it. When I automatically watched it, I was like, man, I want this dude on my podcast. I want to like talk about this and just sort of.
I've met him twice.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure the first time
did he choke you?
Yeah. I you know, it's funny. I didn't know he did that. And I asked him to do it. And I'm pretty sure he dislocated something in my neck with his bicep.
Well, he was like, oh, you're the guy whose bucket list is to get choked out by a WWE Hall of Famer. I'm not a WWE Hall of Famer. However.
Well, I used to say too that that was the greatest moment of my life was getting put in a headlock by Kane Hodder. And I'll tell you something about Kane Hodder. He smells really good.
Yeah.
And like you think like when you're in somebody's armpit, you're gonna like smell armpit and BO. And I'm like,
he might compensate for that.
Yeah.
Like knowing that he's gonna have people in his armpit. He might put on some extra swipes of that.
Well, I think he usually lifts people up by the throat. And I asked for the headlock. And still
I saw he was like putting like he had the gloves on and he was putting his hand
well,
around
yeah, he
people's
wears
necks.
the gloves because of the burns on his hands. Because when I asked him about his tattoo, he took the gloves off so he could show it to me because it's inside his lip.
Yeah.
And it says kill. That was Monster Mania is a magical place. I mean, I've met Kane Hodder, I've met Peter Wellers. I mean, some of my heroes. I'm gonna meet DDP next month.
Yeah, some of my best friends have made huge experiences out of Monster Mania. I mean,
I met John Carpenter.
I used to go to the like they would have a party in the hotel room.
Yeah.
I used to go to those.
Those are so cool.
But I didn't actually like. I've just always thought like I didn't want to like spend money or stand in line.
Yeah, last time I went, I spent about $700.
Yeah, that's crazy
in a weekend.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And that's not even mentioning the hotel and the VIP ticket, and that was just vendors and autographs.
Right. I liked buying T-shirts. I bought a good amount of T-shirts at Monster Mania. I love horror stuff, like horror shirts, and I'm a big fan. But I'm not gonna.
When you get a spending spree, you buy stuff you don't need. Like I bought a Jason Bierstein, and I'm like, Why did I buy this?
Yeah, it's like, what are you gonna do with that? And it's really like a misuse of your funds.
Yeah,
And
it's funny because I bought Lucille there, the bat from
Yeah,
Walking Dead, and we used it in Daisy Durkins 3.
Mm.
And Mark was having her go to town on it, and like I'm seeing pieces of my bat fly all over the room, and I'm picking them up. I'm like, Mark, can't you just be gentle on my bat?
Mhm.
And I ended up gluing it back together. He still has it. I need to get it back from him.
Right.
But
What a dick.
yeah, I hashtag fuck Mark Mackner
Well,
has been something I post a good amount of the time.
oh, do you?
Yeah.
I thought you just came up with it right now.
No, especially when I was doing my podcast, and I would not turn I put my phone on silent here, but I wouldn't do it on my podcast. I don't know why, but it was always him, and I would just look at my phone like fuck Mark Mackner, and that kind of became a thing after that.
Okay. Well,
what was it? Now, tell me what Half-Life was like.
Dude, I was nervous. I was really nervous. I mean, I was like, what year did we do it? I mean, it was probably 2008 or 9 or something like that.
Take a look. I get the.
I was just
2016, I guess, was distribution, but I'm pretty sure the movie was done 5 years before that.
I think
at least.
I think I was a little bit like nervous, but then also like I think I kind of had a little bit of an ego problem at the time. I was still figuring myself out. I didn't really know a whole bunch, but I was not as good as I thought I was.
And then you got to play the Wendigo too.
Yeah.
We also, I mean, that was cool too. You had, Jimmy Snuka and Sarah French in that movie.
Yeah.
And two pretty cool names, and he's not even around anymore.
Right.
Any wrestler that works with Mark Mackner is now dead.
Okay.
King Kong Bundy
Not me. Not me.
Well, I mean,
famous wrestlers.
Famous,
you mean wrestlers who mean something.
Well, because even King Kong Bundy was supposed to work on Daisy 3. And we ended up having to replace him with Nikolai Volkov, who, in my opinion, did a better job than Bundy would have done.
Right.
Oh my God, he was fucking hysterical. I remember he said to me, he goes, "Are you a wrestler?" That's my Russian accent. And I said, "No, I mean, I'm starting out. I just, signed up for school." And I said, "Do you have any advice for someone just starting out?" And he said, "Yeah, don't get hurt."
I thought you were saying that he was asking you for advice.
Yeah.
That's a good plan. Ask people if they're a wrestler, and if they say they're just starting out, ask them for advice. I'm gonna start doing that. Hey, any potential wrestlers out there? Anybody starting up wants to give me some advice?
It's not a bad idea, because then when they hear their own advice, because the problem is people never listen to their own advice.
Right.
Then you just bring their advice back to them.
Right. So if I have any advice for the younger generation of pro wrestling, it is go ahead and give me advice and then follow that.
From my experience, my advice is don't start when you're 32. Because people say to me, oh, well, DDP was 35. I said, I am not DDP.
Right.
I'm glad I gave it a shot. I'm glad.
Time and place are a big thing.
Yeah.
Time and place are a huge thing. Time, place, resources. Like DDP was valuable in more than just the 35-year-old guy who was starting. He had more value than that. And in the right place in the right time with that amount of value, it's just a real great synchronicity.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, he's the exception, not the rule.
Right.
Because how many other wrestlers started at 35?
Right.
Dude, I mean, he, and that was like he always says, it's the age when a lot of guys retire.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I'm 36 now. I started doing this when I was 14 years old.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I hear so many people.
When I go, if I go,
15.
it must make me not very great at it. Like I must have not been one of the greats.
I don't know. I mean, I think getting into WWE or anything like that is just a rare opportunity.
Right. Well, like you said, like we said earlier, value, time and place.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of. I hate saying the word luck because I don't think it's luck, but I think it has a lot to do with the people at the right time and being in the right place.
Look at Alpha Female and how long it took her to get onto NXT UK, because I think she was wrestling for 25 years until she made it to WWE, and she was dealing with WWE for years trying to get in, and she kept she had injuries that was preventing it. but it's just like, you know, in my opinion, probably the greatest female monster heel. There's not many of them, you know, in wrestling history. She was in the indies for the majority of her career. And from what I recently heard, she's not, I don't even think she's in NXT anymore. I don't know if she's still with WWE.
Yeah.
But
I'm not familiar enough with the product.
yeah.
I knew that she was in like the Mae Young Classic, right?
Yeah, she was. Yeah.
But I didn't know anything far beyond that. I knew that I did talk to her on like Facebook back in the day.
Mm.
But other than that, I didn't really have too much familiarity with her.
Yeah, and I was gonna start watching NXT UK when she got on there. I ended up watching one time and then didn't continue with it. I mean, being a wrestling fan is it's so hard to do nowadays. You know, because to watch something every week, and you know, even just like Raw is what, like 2.5 hours, 3 hours, and SmackDown's what, like 3 or 4. I might be, you know, reverse on that one. But I mean, just to watch WWE is so many hours. And then if you want to get into NXT, or if you want to get into AEW, I mean, it's just like, you know, there's only so much time in a week.
Yeah.
And
so much to consume.
Yeah.
So much to consume.
And as much as I would love to just do nothing but watch wrestling all the time, I you know, I do more things than a normal person. We already talked about it. You know, I'm a comedian, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a YouTuber. I have, you know, I work full time. I'm doing a web series. I mean, I only have so much time in a day. I mean, my accomplishment this year is going to be trying to read 20 books. If I can read 20 books in a year, it's going to be a huge accomplishment for me.
Wow. You want to read 20 books?
At least. I want to try to get like 50 in, but 20 is my minimum.
How many are you at so far this year?
One. I'm halfway through. I'm halfway through 2 of them.
Okay.
Well, I'm reading one right now on the Zodiac Killer. Trying to read more true crime lately.
Okay.
Always like serial killers, and most people think I'm weird when I say that.
What's the book called?
What?
What's the book called?
The book's called The Most Dangerous Animal.
Mm-hmm.
And the story's about a guy who, at the age, I mean, it's a true story, about at the age of 39, he gets contacted by his birth mother.
Mm-hmm.
And then he meets his birth mother for the first time, and he asks her who his father is, and she doesn't want to talk about it. So he ends up researching it and finds out his father is the Zodiac Killer.
Oh, wow.
So I thought, I mean, that was just an interesting story. So I'm reading that, and the narrative, and it becomes even more interesting, the backstory, not even the stuff because we don't know who the Zodiac Killer is, and we're never going to know. You know, they're saying recently, they're like, oh, we found DNA that we know who Jack the Ripper is. I'm like, hey, you have 150-year-old DNA? How the hell did you do that?
A friend of mine recommended a book to me. It was about like the Zodiac Killer and the Black Dahlia, like it tied them all together.
Yeah, I've heard that theory.
Most Evil, I think.
Yeah,
was the name of the book.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And I was always fascinated with that. Man,
I mean, you know, because I even heard people say that the Zodiac Killer and the Golden State Killer are the same person. Mm-hmm. People think Ted Cruz is the Zodiac Killer.
He looks like he could be.
He'd have to be 20 years older, and he doesn't even look like the sketch. I don't know where that came from, but I think it's hilarious. He's made jokes about it.
Did you watch 11/22/63?
Oh, that was fantastic.
That's such a good show.
Yeah, and I want to wait a while until I forget a lot about it so I can start reading the book.
Okay.
And then after reading the book, then watching it again.
Yeah, I never read the source material, but
I know there's a lot of differences. I mean, even in the book, the kids, the Loser Club is in it from it.
Mm-hmm.
He comes across them when he goes back.
Okay.
But yeah, I thought it was a phenomenal show. And James Franco, I mean, that guy's a chameleon. I don't think he knows what the hell he wants to do because he's always doing so many different types of things.
Dude, he's up there on my list of like underrated actors. Like that show flew under the radar.
Oh, it did.
Everyone should know that show.
You know, Hulu likes to do a lot of Stephen King stuff, and that's cool because they do Castle Rock now. And I don't know who's doing The Outsider. I think that's HBO. But see, I wrote an article years ago that there needs to be a Stephen King cinematic universe because
kind of like how the MCU.
Exactly. Right. He's one of the only writers that all of his work is a shared universe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, wouldn't it be super cool if we could do what we do have with the MCU?
Mm-hmm.
have a shared universe. The problem is different studios owns different works.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna see about your opinion on it. And I mean, I had this opinion. I don't know if I've said it publicly, but like the amount of separated streaming services, like it's just gonna be one thing and another thing.
It
and
destroyed the DC universe.
It's like,
because
when's it gonna be too much? When is it gonna be that everyone just goes, okay, we don't want to stream anything. Like we only want to stream Netflix and that's it.
Or DC Universe has the CW, the Arrowverse. Then they have their own universe on their DC Universe app, and then they have the movies.
Right.
And it's like
so separated.
And I mean, even Netflix, I mean, had the Marvel stuff, and then they were saying it wasn't connected to the movies, even though it referenced it.
Right.
Same thing with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They would reference the MCU, but they said no, Coulson's still dead. And it's just like, I don't know, man. Can't everybody just get along? I mean, if Fox and Marvel can get along, anybody can get along.
I think that Disney is going to wind up owning WWE one of these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, wasn't I know when, because it ended up it was on the Sci-Fi Channel for a little bit, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, ECW was on Sci-Fi.
ECW wasn't WWE wasn't at all.
I
remember ECW was.
I think maybe SmackDown was on Sci-Fi for a minute.
Because Sci-Fi and USA, I think, are owned by the same.
Well, Viacom.
Yeah.
So it's weird when it comes to all the the corporations and the rights being on this end for this thing, and the whole Deadpool thing.
Yeah.
And the whole Spider-Man thing, Sony and all, mixing those is so always up in the air.
You know, it's funny. I own a John Moxley shirt, but I don't own a Dean Ambrose shirt. And I don't think I would buy a Dean Ambrose shirt. And it's weird because, it's why does it matter? It's the same person. Is it? I mean, is John, because Ryan Reynolds has played Deadpool. Ryan Reynolds has played Green Lantern.
Right.
I mean, it's like, because I always thought WWE is basically kind of, has become a lot of like Marvel and stuff like that, because they call the WWE universe now.
Right.
So it's like, if somebody goes over to AEW or TNA, are we allowed to even talk about stuff that happened in WWE? I mean, they did it. Flair and Sting's last match was on TNA, and they talked about, things for years, wrestling each other on WCW and stuff like that. But then once again, wrestlers who came from WWE and AEW know how to change their names,
right,
and take up new characters. So it's like, where there's no continuity in that,
right? I as a talent always was concerned about going somewhere and wanting them to change my name. Like, oh, so you're gonna erase who I actually am?
Exactly.
And I was very hesitant on it for so long. I mean, maybe me putting that energy out there was one of the reasons I never got anywhere.
Well, look at our
I don't want to say anything is the reason, but there are reasons, and I think that might have been one of them. Like you said, Nick Burke,
he had two personas,
right?
And he would actually wrestle the same show under two different personas.
Yeah.
Nikki Benz and Nick Burke,
right?
And that's incredible. You know what? And it's funny, and I think you and I are similar, and I think, sometimes not making it is just being a jack of all trades, a master of none. I
don't know how you can easily define what making it even is.
Yeah.
It's tough because I'm making it. If being me is making it, I'm making it.
Well, I look at it this way. My lifelong dream is to make movies, and I'm making movies. So I am living my dream. So that's all that matters.
Right.
Just the fact that somebody I didn't know out of the blue asked me to come on their podcast. That should show. Something's right. If I have a story worth telling, because that's the thing. Like, people say, what's your mission in life? What's your goal in life? And it's to tell a story. And I haven't told it yet.
Right.
And in the end, I think my body of work will be that story, but I know the story. I just don't know how to tell it. And it's literally the story of my life. And I've written so many different versions of it. And even my current web series, Most Likely to Die, is a version of it, because yes, it's not me. I'm playing a different character, but I mean, it's very, very, very autobiographical at the same time. Like I said, I never peaked at high school. I wasn't all American. I was on the wrestling team. And there's a big misconception with I was on the wrestling team, but I was never popular or one of the cool kids. I mean, you can be a jock and not be the king of the school. I mean, and
it's weird. What's really weird about it is you're 33 now.
Yeah.
Your jock years and being in a wrestling team in high school should be way behind you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, whenever anybody brings up high school to me or anything, like the underlining thought that I'll constantly have is like, I've lived so much of a life that I don't remember most of it.
Well, I feel like when I don't
remember most of that part, those parts of it.
I feel like when I talk about college, it's like it just feels like a lifetime ago.
Right.
I mean, high school. I mean, and the only reason I'm thinking about it now is because I'm writing about it. I'm writing about a character, who, is still, not obsessed, but still haunted by his past.
Yeah.
Because that's like, peaked in high school. That's when he was at his best. And that's when his life was really his life.
Mm-hmm.
So, and for the most part, I mean, high school, that was just kind of a thing. It happened. And I didn't even go to high school, to be honest with you. I went freshman year, and then I spent most of high school in a reform school. Okay. So I didn't get any of the John Hughes stuff. I sat behind a computer screen and,
I think that no one really got the John Hughes stuff. I think that's just an idealistic, like TV, like shined up version of what childhood
what
is.
A weird dude, though, John Hughes.
Yeah.
Why didn't he like nerds? The nerd never got the girl.
I think that he thought he just was kind of going for what he thought would be popular.
Because it's like, poor Ducky in Pretty in Pink. And then they made the nerd a real weirdo in 16 Candles. And then I never saw Kevin McAllister ever get a girl.
No, I mean, he was like 10 years old, though.
Yeah.
I mean, 10-year-olds don't get the girl.
I love the rumors that he grew up to become the Jigsaw Killer, or the theory.
I didn't know that theory.
Yeah, and I'm totally for it, except for the fact that he's, the age just don't match.
Yeah, the ages totally don't match.
But I mean,
so like they're saying that the Tobin
Bell
character is supposed to be
Kevin McAllister growing up.
Well, that's not his name in the story, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even The Collector was meant to be a prequel to Saw. I personally think that it's a shared universe, and I think it should be. They should do something to connect them. But I mean, it was pitched as a Saw prequel. Okay. So I don't know if The Collector turns into Jigsaw. That's what their idea was.
Did you like Umbrella Academy? Did you watch that show?
Oh, that was great. And I've always wanted to read the comic. And there's a couple like October Faction is something that's out now, and I want to watch that because I'm a big Steve Niles fan. Mm-hmm. And then Lock and Key, I read the first graphic novel of that.
Yeah, that's a great show.
Oh, the first arc I read was so slow. Uh-huh. Joe Hill tends to be a very slow writer, and I mean his dad's known for that too. But
did you watch the show Lock and Key?
Not yet, but I'm planning on it. Oh, but yeah, Umbrella Academy, to me, I love TV shows that have an established, expanded superhero universe that's not DC or Marvel. Right. And when you watch it, you're like, oh, that character is basically Superman. Mm-hmm. And like, I want to watch The Boys. I haven't watched that yet.
I was about to ask you about that.
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of these shows too, I haven't watched yet because I've always planned on reading the comic and haven't got around to it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to Umbrella Academy season 2. And I'm pretty sure that the comics ended when the first season ended. So it's going to be an original storyline the next season.
Oh, okay, cool.
I think so. Oh. And it's funny because the one brother in it, the one who's like the crazy drug addict one.
Yeah.
He was on a show called Misfits, which was a superhero show in England, which apparently they're bringing to America, but they're going to water it down because American TV is so much
limited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very like, lots, vulgar and nudity and sex and violence. And that's why I don't want to see it in an American version. But he basically played the same character on both shows, which was really cool.
Well, it's a whole new audience that's going to see it,
Yeah. But it's like, I mean,
different kind of audience too.
All right, to go back to like Phantom of the Opera is my favorite book.
Right.
And people say, I love Phantom of the Opera, and they talk about the musical. I'm like, that's not Phantom of the Opera. Phantom of the Opera is not a love story. It's a battle between good and evil. It's a horror novel. It's about a monster and a man trying to save a woman from the monster. It's a classic horror trope. So it's like, but anybody who says I'm a fan of the Opera because they saw a musical that was based on the book and they think that's the story. So it's like, for me, it's like watching the American version of Misfits will basically be the same thing, because you're going to see a watered down version of something really good.
So it's that by title, but not by content.
Yeah, and part of this is why I'm excited to do a web series, because I don't have to deal with a network or anything. I mean, unless somebody decides to pick it up and distribute it or stream it.
And if it's good, why shouldn't they?
Yeah, but
of course we all want to make a living doing what we love.
Yeah, but I mean, the cool thing is there are different streaming services now that aren't Netflix or Amazon.
Right.
So it's like, somewhere that,
does Shudder have any series?
Yeah.
They have.
Yeah. Shudder. I've been watching this one show on Shudder called Lucky Man. It's created by Stan Lee, and it has nothing to do with horror. And it's a Shudder original. But I mean, they brought back Critters and Creepshow as a series. Creepshow as a TV series, that's genius.
Yeah, I mean, that's endless. That's an endless supply of stories that can be told.
And Greg Nicotero's doing it, so who better to do it?
Yeah, that's incredible.
I mean, somebody who started out working with Romero, and I believe Nicotero was trained by Savini.
Savini was in Lock and Key.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I know. I really got to watch it.
He was just a small cameo.
He was the first horror person, horror icon I ever met.
Okay, cool.
And he's a strange dude.
I think Day of the Dead was one of my favorite movies. My favorite.
It's the most underrated.
Yeah,
Romero.
it is incredibly underrated.
I wouldn't say it's my favorite. But I would say it is one of the most underrated zombie movies.
It's got an original take. With all this, the going underground thing. That's something that no one else has really done that.
But I mean, it expands on, it basically brings out Romero. So Romero had a story going from Night of the Living Dead all the way to Land of the Dead, because you got the first one, just kind of introduced it. And then the second one, you have the concept of, there was a reason they were at the mall.
Right.
The zombies came back to the mall because they were at the mall in their past life.
Right. It's like a routine.
Yeah. And then Day of the Dead brought that even further with Bub, one of the greatest zombies in history.
I loved Bub.
Where, it's basically with Bub was he wasn't like brain dead or a zombie, but he was kind of reborn as something else. And he ended up, the first zombie to ever shoot a gun.
Right. Yeah.
And then in Land of the Dead, he did the same thing with Big Daddy. Big Daddy was basically Bub, the same type of character who by the end of it basically just turned into a person trying to take care of his family.
I think they're doing another. My girlfriend just did one. Zack Snyder directed Army of the Dead.
And
I think that might be loosely tied to.
Because he remade Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
But one of the best horror remakes of all time, Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead. Yeah, it was sick.
And I heard I've never watched the Day of the Dead.
Oh my God, it's so bad.
Yeah, I've heard the worst thing.
Don't even.
Well, they recently made a new remake of Day of the Dead that I heard is pretty good.
And they were like,
I think it's called Contagion or something.
Crawling on the ceilings.
Or Bloodline.
The zombies in the remake of Day of the Dead were running.
Well, doesn't Ving Rhames play a different character too?
I don't remember, but I know it's Mina Servina. What?
Mina Servina.
It's the girl from American Pie.
Yeah. And Nick Cannon was in it too, wasn't he?
I don't recall.
But yeah, it's funny because and then after that, Romero started continuing the series, and the last one I saw was Diary of the Dead.
Yeah, that was a found footage thing.
Yeah, well, it's cool because he went back to his roots of doing something more low budget.
Right.
And when I met Savini, he told me that it wasn't connected to the rest.
Okay.
But I don't know. I know he did several ones after that, but I haven't watched them.
Mhm.
Romero, I mean, it's weird though, because Romero's responsible for so much in modern horror, but he really only did one thing.
Mhm.
Like he did The Crazies and he had other movies too. But I mean, like, look at somebody like Carpenter who has such a body of work, but Romero kind of just did the one series, and
Right.
that's what changed horror, and that's what changed I mean everything, really.
Yeah. It really opened up. It really opened up an idea.
You know what I think is cool, because vampires are from Transylvania and werewolves are from like Europe somewhere, but zombies are from Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
Pittsburgh. That's what the,
Right,
the zombie
yeah.
genre is.
Everybody wore flannels.
Yeah.
Everybody wore flannels. Everybody gets a flannel.
And I've been to
you get a flannel.
I've been to the Monroeville Mall 3 times.
Oh yeah.
Which is super
It's
cool.
still standing.
It's still standing. So no, I might be lying. I think I might have went twice, but I remember the first time I went, there was nothing at all to acknowledge that probably the greatest zombie movie of all time was filmed here.
That I did the same. I went to Quick Stop.
Really?
And there's nothing to acknowledge that Clerks ever took place.
And that's a bigger tourist attraction.
Maybe. Yeah.
So after,
well, I mean, like it's more recent. Like it's it's got more current relevance than.
Well, yeah, and it's still there. It's still
Dawn of
looks
the Dead.
the same.
Right.
Like, the Monroeville Mall looks nothing like what it did in the movie.
Right.
But so what I did was, when I was about 14 or 15 years old, I went to a design your own hat shirt and I said, can you make me a hat that says Monroeville, PA, home of the dead?
Mm-hmm.
So then I went back years later, and they actually opened up a zombie shop.
Mm-hmm.
And then it closed. It didn't last long. So what I ended up doing is I went to FYE and I bought a zombie mug and kept the receipt, so I had something. But they did at least at this point have a plaque. Which was cool, but I feel like for a while they were just trying to forget it.
Yeah.
But I think one Walking Dead came out that brought the zombie genre back, and then I think they started to embrace it at that point. But the zombie genre started to, I mean, Walking Dead really brought it back and made it something bigger than it's ever been.
Something that is like wheeling around in my head right now is I'm thinking about I think in one of Kevin Smith's other movies, Zack and Miri.
Yeah, the Monroeville Zombies.
Monroeville Zombies.
I was thinking of that when I was talking. That's the funny thing.
That's it's group mind. That's some comedian shit.
Yeah, because I mean, that always stuck out there. I wanted to get that hockey jersey.
Yeah, it's cool.
But I mean, like, to me, Monroeville, PA, I've been there a couple of times. It's a very important place.
Yeah,
because I mean, even because it's funny because Dawn of the Dead, it starts in Philadelphia, and then they fly to Pittsburgh.
The ghetto Holocaust.
Yeah,
yeah.
But what's funny too about Walking Dead is they changed the genre too, because every zombie movie always had the same ending. Every single zombie movie had the same ending. Mm-hmm. And then Walking Dead goes and they said, let's tell the story without an ending.
Right.
And just keep it going, because it's always they hop on the boat and they hop in the helicopter and they fly away, or they fly somewhere.
Right.
And
the origin and the solution were always the most important part of watching a zombie or a vampire story when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I always wanted to know what the origin was and how they got out of it at the end.
It's funny because Romero told us right away.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, as a writer, they always say the rules show, don't tell. But Romero told right away, because if you watch Night of the Living Dead, in the radio broadcast, he says a meteor came down, landed on the earth, vapors came up, and then rained acid rain, and it brought the and then it sunk into the graves, and then the zombies climbed out, and they basically did that too with Return of the Living Dead, similar. So it's like,
I can't believe you didn't like that. I can't believe you don't like. It was it was fun.
So here's the first thing. This is something why Max Brooks said he didn't like it, is that zombies eat brains.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole function of a zombie is to act like a virus and to spread the virus. But when a zombie eats a brain, you're not spreading the virus because it's destroying its fuel. I mean, the brain's gone, so that person's not going to become a zombie.
Right.
So that doesn't make any sense.
Well, the virus is spread not through the virus is spread through the acid rain in that story, and not through biting, but it does spread the virus to the boyfriend. If you love me, you'll let me eat your brains.
Yeah, I remember that.
So the virus
stuff like that.
But they breathed it in.
Yeah.
So it was more of like
airborne. They burned up the body and then
it was more of an airborne thing and not a spread through scratch.
I'll always love that the red hair naked zombie chick though.
Right.
But
Yeah,
no,
I mean, that was a very seeing that movie was at a very pubescent time in my life. So of course that means something to me too.
Well, also, I mean, I love what they did though. I loved how they made a sequel without making a sequel.
Right.
It was such a genius idea. I mean, even the title insinuates it's a sequel, but it's not.
Right, because it has of the dead.
Especially when you have a movie called Return of the Dead Part 2, you know that Return of the Dead's not a sequel to Night of the Living Dead.
Right.
And also, that's another thing is Romero never used the term living dead again. The rest of the movies are just the dead of the dead.
Yes, it was radiation.
Return. So yeah, I remember it was the meteor. I thought so. They still crawled out of the graves though, right?
When the radiation went up and then the rain came down.
I thought that there was the same thing, the acid rain, but I thought it was the cause. I thought the radiation came from the caused the acid rain in like Living Dead. Because it is hard to follow because you're just listening to a radio broadcast.
Right. Well, man, I mean,
and this was I don't even know, you know how much money they spent on that.
Well, it's funny too, because like you didn't get another horror like zombie comedy until Shaun of the Dead.
You know, another movie Undead is very underrated. I think it's a New Zealand movie, and that actually that's the meteors. The first zombie, she gets a meteor in her head, and then she goes. I love that one. It's very underrated. But Dead Alive was made. I think it was made in the 90s, and it looked like the 70s. But it was by Peter Jackson.
Peter Jackson, yeah.
And that's another classic horror film that I fucking
rat
hate.
like bit his mom.
Yeah, I hate that movie so much. I hate gore for the sake of gore.
Okay.
And there's so much of it in there.
I mean, I didn't hate Dead Alive. I mean, it for sure has been a number of years since I've seen it.
I did like how in the King Kong movie Peter Jackson did, underneath the boat, they're in a room with all these cages, and in the back there's a cage that says "Beware the Rat Monkey." I thought that was.
Dude, I love the little nods like that.
Yeah, me too.
Little nods like that. Like I was just saying, like Monroeville Zombies. There's a little nod right there.
Well, I mean, Peter Jackson was the guy who started with horror and then got famous for doing like the Lord of the Rings stuff.
Right.
But I mean, I still think his best work is Frighteners. I love Frighteners.
Was that Michael J. Fox?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Still one of my favorite ghost movies. And speaking of which, I
think I had a poster for that movie that I got at the video store. Like,
really?
When I was in middle school. Yeah, it was a cool poster.
Jeffrey, I forget his name, and it sucks because I met the guy who played the cop in it, the creepy cop. But I'm just escaping my mind right now, his name. But one of the coolest people I think I've met at Monster Mania.
This might be the first episode.
Jeffrey Combs.
Okay. This might be the first episode of my podcast that's like a lot of horror movie talk.
Well, when you have, a filmmaker who makes horror. Because, it's funny. Like I mentioned, a lot of friends have been on here. Joe Garifo. Funny, last time I saw him was at Monster Mania. And
I text with Joe all the time, dude.
Yeah. Joe's kind of would help me get started as a filmmaker.
Okay.
And then Jason Hazelwood, it's funny, he was with me when I started out opening for Levy. And then Lamar Lee. I know him through like
I just saw him on Wednesday.
Yeah, I think I saw that you did something with him recently.
Yeah.
But I see him a lot of mics.
He was here. He watched the Royal Rumble over here.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, he I see him a lot of time too. I feel like the only person who books me anymore is Fenris.
Okay. Yeah. Matt, I did like a mini mark out when I first met, not when I first met him, but it was like he met me at like it was like a competition, a comedy competition. He met me and then booked me.
Yeah.
He booked me for something. And when he booked me, I had just gotten featured in Pro Wrestling Illustrated. So they gave me a full page in Pro Wrestling Illustrated.
Well, he's a wrestler too.
Right. Yeah. But I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know it
until after 5 years of knowing him.
Right. I didn't know it at the time. So I brought the magazine with me and I showed it to everybody who was in the audience as like it's a cool thing. Here, pass this around. Here's me in this magazine. Like nobody, like comedians don't have stuff like that at a comedy show that you go to. And he was like, oh, cool. He was like, oh, I used to wrestle for ECWA too. And I was like, you did? And it was like, and he said, yeah, I was under a mask. I was
Yeah, he
Japanese pool boy. And I was like, that was you. I used to see you in the magazine all the time. And I like had a little mini mark out for the guy. And it was just funny how it all like tied back together.
First time I ever met Fenris was at a show, and he was introduced as, if Bob Kaplan was a musical comic, he would be this guy.
Okay.
So
Do
whenever
you do a lot of Holocaust jokes?
no, I don't. But
because Fenris does a
oh
lot
my
of
god, he
Holocaust.
does. Well, the Anne Frank song he
Yeah,
does.
he does a couple Anne
Yeah.
Frank songs.
But what was the one when Anne Frank gave Hitler a Pepsi or something? Wasn't that a song he did?
I don't know.
But
Anne Frank did this, and that's his song. Any Anne Frank.
I want to create a
on a ukulele.
I want to create a Philly Comedy Awards just so Fenris can get the award for best internet troll.
Is he a big troll?
Oh God. And you know, I've talked to other comedians saying I love Fenris, but sometimes I have to hit snooze for 30 days.
I see his I mean, I follow him on Instagram, but I don't follow him on anything else.
On Facebook, about 3 or 4 times a week, he'll post, guys, don't forget to turn your clocks back tonight.
I don't, you know, it's funny, dude. Like I think we're friends on Facebook, but like I don't check it like that. I don't check Facebook enough to like get offended or bothered by what people do or say.
So whenever Philly's Funniest is going on, whenever somebody invites him to something or posts about it, he says the same exact response every time. Oh, I can't make it, man, but I'll check you out at the finals. He says that for everyone. And then Cassandra, when she won, I asked him, did he really show up to the final? She goes, yeah, he showed up and he took a picture with me. And then somebody posted it all over the place.
Yeah. Oh man, I can't even remember the last time I saw him, but there's a bar down the street from here, and we ran a mic. Me and my old roommate, we ran a mic at this bar, and he was doing his ukulele jokes, and some girl got real drunk, and I had never seen this before. I know I'll never see it again. She got really drunk, and she went up and she reached up through his shorts, like the legs of his shorts, and she pulled his underwear off through his legs of his shorts. She like cut his underwear with scissors while he was playing a song on his ukulele.
So wait, she cut, this wasn't part of the act?
It wasn't, no, she was just some real drunk lady. And then she was like, hey, I have a ukulele in my car. Can you teach me how to play it? And she went out to her car and got her ukulele and then found me online and was like, hey, do you know if Fenris stole my ukulele? I was like, no, I have no idea. Like,
you know, it's funny. You want to ask about health stories. I'll tell you the best. So back when I was very, very new and opening for Bob Levy, which I thought was the high point of my career, turned out to be the low point.
So you peaked down.
Yeah, nothing happened. Nothing about Bob. It was more so the promoter I had issues with. But I mean, I used to open for Bob Levy, and then then years later, I'm featuring at the Truck main stage. That was the high point, obviously, right. Especially now the Truck's not there anymore. But I'll tell you two great comedy stories. So the first one, so there's a female comedian goes up, and she's bombing, and she starts getting heckled. And she goes off on him. She takes it way too far. And at one point, he actually walked up and he grabbed the mic and he said something and walked away. So she starts really
the heckler.
Yeah, she starts really going into him. And honestly, it was the best thing she did was the heckler, because she was bombing before that. So he ends up charging at her. And my dad was there. My dad's like in the audience, and he's like, "Oh God." He's like, I don't want to do something. I can get hurt, but I think I got to grab him. So some guy grabs him. He punches the guy. They tear him out of the bar. I end up getting covered in beer because I'm by the door, slam him against the pavement, and apparently his head sounded like a coconut. And he was in a coma for like a week. Jeez. And then I had to go on after that.
How do you follow that?
Yeah, I mean, and I was still, like I said, I was very new at the time. So I bombed.
Yeah.
That's also one of those venues, no matter what happens, I bombed. I don't even know. Should you mention the name of the place? Like, I heard that they're much better now, though, but it's the Whitpain Tavern. I swear I've never had a good set there.
I don't know it.
Yeah, well, it's like one of those places where it's a bar. People would rather listen to the game
or like watch
set.
the TVs. The TVs are always still on.
You got to turn the TVs off.
The TVs are always still on, and people are still talking at full volume and not paying attention. Like that, like a lot of times at comedy at bars, you still hear lots of like.
I don't like playing bars for that reason.
Glasses getting thrown in the trash.
Absolutely.
You never. It's weird. Like you never get the full attention of the people.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. Like Bob Levy, when I saw him go up at the end, he got it. But he was like, I remember at one point he was getting mad when people just kept walking.
Is he still around?
Apparently.
I don't know him. I've never met him. I've heard about him.
Oh yeah.
I don't know who he is.
Yeah. I mean, he started out from the Howard Stern show.
Okay.
I mean, he used to be one of my favorite comics. Then I worked with him for a while. Nothing bad about Bob. I'm just going to say bad things about Bob and then say I have nothing bad to say about Bob.
That's the best way to cover your ass.
But
what a jerk off. I mean, all due respect, I love the guy and everything. What a dickhead.
But so that was one story. So the other story was when I was playing the truck, we used to work with Praying Mantis Promotions. I think it's the name of the promoter. And we were his first comedy group. And I remember he said, "Man, you guys are so easy. We put you in the green room. We give you drink tokens and a case of water and you're good. We don't have to move equipment and all this stuff." So I remember he did his 10-year anniversary show and he wanted us to be a part of it. So he mainly does metal bands. And I'll tell you, when you're doing a set in front of a bunch of metalheads, like 100 metalheads there to see metal, they don't give a shit about your comedy.
They don't give a shit.
So it was a hard crowd. So not to make things even worse, I had a nosebleed in the middle of my set. So what do you do when you have a nosebleed in the middle of your set? You stick your finger right here and you finish your set. And that's what I did. And I was wearing my academic probation tour. That was the name of the tour at the time. I was wearing a shirt. It's a white shirt covered in blood. I'm up there and people thought it was part of my bit. And I'm like, how dare you think I'm a prop comic? So I remember having to go backstage and clean myself up afterwards. And then Lauren Lepre, who is a filmmaker.
Yeah, I know Lauren. I did Dark Military.
Oh yeah. I did see that you were in Dark Military.
Yeah.
Well, he was a bouncer at the truck and because he used to do Liberty Shorts there.
Yeah. I remember.
So I remember years later, he says to me, he goes, "Did you ever have a nosebleed on stage?" Because we didn't realize, like we knew each other and we didn't realize that we also knew each other through that as well. So I remember him bringing that up years later. It's like, "Did you have a nosebleed on stage?" I've
known Lauren for a while, but I met him through a wrestler because Lauren was like involved with wrestling very loosely.
Yes,
like back in the day.
What I love about Lauren is one of the most legit people. When you talk to Lauren, he's very straight up. He's very brutally honest. I remember he showed up on the day when we were doing Daisy 3 with when Nikolai Volkov was there, and he shows up. I'm like, "Lauren, what are you doing here?" He goes, "I was driving by, saw everybody check in here on Facebook. I wanted to see what was going on." And I remember he said to Mark,
where was it? In
was it
CZW school?
Yeah.
I think I was supposed to be there that day, but I didn't.
Well, I'm not sure if you were supposed to be. I think you were supposed to be on the second day we were there, or the third day we were there, which was the day I bruised my ribs, because that was the day with all the wrestling.
Okay. Well, it was something like, I think Mark said something to me about wanting to play like a promoter or something like that, and I had too many other things going on.
Speaking of which, I had 3 surprises I wanted to bring with me. One was the DVD. Another one was I would love for you to be in the web series.
Okay.
Because I definitely want people who can do their own stunts, which is huge.
Okay.
And you're about the right age to look like you went to high school with me.
Right.
But it was funny because I'm like, I wanted to ask him, but I said, well, I'll wait until I'm on his podcast to ask him.
Man. I'm we can talk about more of the specifics after. I'm happy to work with you.
Yeah.
And that's really the whole point of all of this. The whole point of all this is to collaborate with other people who are like-minded. That was the reason I wanted us to sit down together.
Well, I would love, now that I've come on your podcast, I would love for you to come on my channel.
Okay.
Now I told you I didn't want to tell you about my interview show when we were like off the mic. But so basically, so you know Hot Ones. Everybody knows Hot Ones, one of the biggest shows on YouTube. So I mean,
it's about like chicken wings.
Yeah. So basically, Sean Evans, probably one of the best interviewers of all time. The guy does more research than anyone. He has the craziest tolerance. So he eats the wings with the guest, but the guest is the one who's dying and in pain, and they're trying to answer questions while their mouths are on fire, and it works so well. So my show is the opposite. So I like, the whole reason I get into the things I get into, where it comes to the spicy challenges, even the pro wrestling, is just my masochism. So I might as well just use my masochism, for entertainment. So the whole point of my show is that I'm the one who's in pain and the guest is fine. So it's like the guest is in the awkward position to answer questions while the person next to them is dying from hot sauce. So I'm sitting there eating hot sauce the whole time while I'm asking questions.
Okay.
And I'm crying and I'm sweating and I'm huffing and puffing and I'm still asking questions. So another reason behind it is I feel like on a lot of interview shows, the interviewer talks too much.
Right.
Now I like, you and I having a conversation, so it's not like you're.
Yeah, I don't consider this an interview at all.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So this is more of a conversation, but shows when you have, someone you're interviewing. Like for instance, when I had Nick Burke on my podcast, that was an interview.
Right.
Whenever I have a guest on, it's usually a conversation, but that was an interview because Nick's got stories.
Right.
But I feel like, on shows like that, when someone's being interviewed, the interviewer talks too much. So let's make it that he can't talk.
Like, it's weird, man. I have another podcast, right?
I think I remember seeing that. Yeah,
I do another a wrestling podcast called Rassle Rock, Rassle, and Nick Burke's on. He's like every third or fourth episode he joins us. But we've gotten so many cool stories. Like we've been doing this podcast for like 5 years now. But like hearing stories from like when he was like 19 and 20.
Oh yeah.
And like all the names and the decisions. And dude, I remember, like I said, I'm hearing these stories and I was there.
Yeah. Well, it's like
hearing them from his perspective.
When I first saw him on Velocity and WWE, and then he's on my podcast, my short-lived podcast, telling the story about he was wrestling with a broken leg.
Right.
And this was 20, no, not 20, but maybe like 15 years ago. And I'm just finding out, oh my God, when I was watching that, you had a broken leg.
Right.
But I'm worried about having Nick on my channel because I like to keep the segments very short because it's very painful for me. And Nick talks for a long time because he's got a lot to say.
Yeah.
So it's like, I got to say to him, like, Nick, you got to keep it short if I'm interviewing you while I'm eating hot sauce.
Did you see the video of him roasting Steve Dotson?
I have not.
He did like a Comedy Central roast of my friend Steve Dotson's a filmmaker. And man, it was so funny, but I'll show you that video once we get off mic.
Oh, like especially like we had a lot of scenes together on Daisy Durkins 3, and even like I remember when he was wrestling, which was by the way really cool to see him wrestling.
Yeah,
someone who's pretty much retired. But it was like just the goofy faces he makes and stuff because his character was supposed to be like the dumb sidekick.
Did you ever experience watching the Red Bull Nick Burke? Like when he was doing like the Red Bull stuff and he was like really a technician. Like he was like really killing it and like being taken serious. Like his match with like Tony Mamaluke and stuff back in the early 2000s.
Speaking of which too, one of the first wrestlers I ever worked with when I was working with Garifo was Blue Meanie. I remember meeting Blue Meanie on my birthday one year.
Yeah.
Before we started working on Booted.
Yeah.
And he was on.
I had an IMDb credit on Booted.
Did you really?
I did. I never showed up. But
I don't even think I'm in the movie anymore because they did reshoots and I didn't show up.
I don't think it is a movie. Is it not happen? It doesn't happen. It's not happening.
It's been in post production
because I know that like the some of the filmmakers and the filmographers and
you've had one of the producers on here
fallen out completely, right?
Yeah, because I know you've had a few of the producers on here, to be honest.
Tommy,
yeah, and I don't know if Joe was technically a producer,
right? Well, it's funny because I fell into that group of people, and I don't know if that Joe was completely separate.
Yeah.
I met Joe on The Last Airbender.
Yeah, Joe for the most part likes to really keep to himself.
And he hung with Costello.
Yes.
So those guys I knew through that.
Me and Costello, who I don't even think he goes by that name anymore,
Mhm.
are on good terms.
Okay.
We were not for a very long time.
It's pretty common with him to be on bad terms with people, and that's kind of strange. I'm not on bad terms with him. I've never had the moment where there is bad terms, but I know I've heard lots of stories.
And I'm not putting him completely to blame. Like, you know, part of it was me as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying like, you know, it was all him, and you know, a lot of it was me. It's kind of stuff I said by accident. But I mean, we're in good terms now, and I'm glad we are because I've known him a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we fought, and maybe I don't have the best things to say all the time about him, but he's still been a friend of mine for a very long time.
I have a really funny story involving Costello. On the Dark Military, he was like camera AD, I think, or camera.
I'm surprised because
second camera.
Joe was in that.
Yeah, this was when they were still like buds.
Yeah.
Because they owned the gear. That was their gear.
Really?
Yeah, like the Reds and all that.
So this was after I fell out with them because they weren't there yet. When the last time I worked with them was Party Smashers.
Okay, I wasn't familiar with that.
Yeah, my film that I wrote and produced that you know, hopefully nobody sees.
But Sean got wasted.
Yep.
Sean got so drunk, and there, like, it was, you know, after we were already wrapped, like for the day, and I know that there was stories, and I wasn't involved with this, so I'm not going to say it one way or the other, but I know that there was something with like a golf cart. I can't say anything about him driving a golf cart drunk, but that was one of the stories and people's dramas that came up during it.
I'll tell you some of the stories you might hear about Sean being drunk. A lot of times I was drunk right next to him too.
But the story is just that he said the funniest thing I'd ever heard a drunk person say. Because, well, first he did a thing that was something that was like, maybe don't do that.
Yeah.
He had sweatpants on, and he like put his balls on this girl's head while she was like sitting on the floor. And I was like, whoa, that was maybe not the best move. And then she goes, did you just put your balls on my head? And he said, I wouldn't put my balls on your head if you were giving me $78 and I had an overdue cable bill for $76. I was like, what? Where did that come from? Who thinks of something like that?
I'll tell you a funny story. We did an overnight shoot on a film called Heaven Burns, and it was me and Joe and Sean and his his girlfriend at the time, and we drove all the way to Maryland. Now this is one of the worst nights of my life because I didn't buy cigarettes before we left Philly, and I didn't realize we were going to be able to nowhere. So I'm like there with like a half a cigarette to last me this whole shoot. And we're drinking.
So that's a pretty extreme addiction to cigarettes. Huh?
But well, especially when I was on set back then, I would always be smoking cigarettes nonstop during all the downtime. But I remember like it was like Sean wanted to stay, me and Joe wanted to go. It's like 6 a.m, and we want to go home, and he wants to keep partying. So they get in a fight because Sean wanted to drive, but it was like he was the only one that was drunk. But eventually, and I remember Greg Booth trying to be like, well, how about we just do like halfway and this and that? And then eventually like Sean drives and I remember dozing in and off. And then I came back and I hear Joe go, no, you can't blow him. And apparently Sean was trying to get roadhead while we were like passed out in the back seat. So I end up hearing sucking noises. And I found out later on that was my complete anxiety.
That was just imagination.
Yeah, that was like, or I was dreaming or something, or I was so scared that I actually did hear it because nothing happened. But I'm sitting there thinking that I guess I was probably even asleep at that point, but I'm thinking that he's getting roadhead because I thought I heard it, but nothing ended up happening. Because he said to me, he goes, "Oh no, I wanted her to, but she didn't." But but that was a crazy night. I would love to see that film. I don't know what happened with that. But that was a fun night. If I had a pack of cigarettes on me, man, I would have been very happy with it.
Well, like I was going back into like my so the origin of knowing Sean and Joe was through Last Airbender.
Okay.
But I did another movie from Mike Lecision. It was called No Footing.
Okay. Yeah, I know of the film. I remember.
And that's where I met Derek. Derek and Frank and I think Tommy.
Probably shouldn't talk about Frank.
Yeah, probably not. but
you know, I thought I saw him the other night. I wasn't sure if that was him.
We talked about him on this the last time Joe was here.
Really?
Yeah.
About what happened?
I don't know if we talked. Maybe we tippy-toed around it.
Yeah, like we are right now.
Yeah. I mean, people don't know. There's this guy named Frank, and he was a filmmaker in this group of filmmakers.
Oh, he's a filmmaker.
Sure. But he was always really nice to me. He was a big wrestling fan.
Yeah.
He was a big wrestling fan.
He was supposed to direct a script of mine once.
And he got arrested for taking pictures of girls underneath the wall in the Target dressing room.
Yeah.
That's weird. I didn't know.
Look, you know what?
But you know, in the amount of people that you know, there's probably a lot of weird people that just go skate right under the radar. And you
Look,
don't know.
I'm not condoning what he did, but you know what? I mean, everybody's a pervert. We all have our things, and maybe he should have went about it a better way. I mean, he didn't. I don't know. I think it's a touchy subject because to me it was weird. I'm like, wow. And I've heard worse stories from people I've known.
Right.
Done worse. Like I remember a comic book store I used to go to, and the guy ended up having sex with an underage girl in the back room.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm not going to mention any names.
Well, you don't have to.
Yeah.
You're not on the spot to mention any names.
But it's weird. I mean, you never know with people. And the worst part was his mugshot. He didn't have his beard, so he just looked weird without the beard.
Well, going into what I was saying, like, when it came to, I didn't know when the two teams met up, but it was around the time. So it was like,
I think we met all these same people around the same time too.
It was like Jake and John, John G. I don't remember how to say his last name.
Go. Yeah, I'm not gonna try. Guana.
Right. So like,
and I've heard him say his name out loud.
I hung out with those dudes outside of the filmmaking stuff.
Yeah.
Like they came to one of my shows, like one of my wrestling shows. They were really supportive, and like even for a little while, we just kind of all fell out from each other, but not like on purpose. Never like a fight or anything. It was like, they asked me to come in an audition for Booted, and Sean was supposed to be directing that.
He did. I mean, he did direct it.
Right. So I did the audition. I went into like that paper factory I
auditioned for it too.
That John worked for.
Yeah.
And
it was a very professional setup for the audition.
Yeah, it was incredibly professional.
Yeah.
And I thought I did pretty good on the audition, and they all liked me, and they all laughed, and they were like thanking me so much for coming in. And it was like I felt like I kind of have this. It'd be really cool if I have this. And then they never talked to me again.
Mm-hmm. And
they were like, "Oh, the part that you auditioned for, Sean gave himself."
Yeah, I remember that.
And I was like, "Oh, that's
well," because I mean, Sean always told me that he was an actor first and foremost,
right? And then they were like, "Oh, yeah, you can be an extra in it. Got to be here on this day."
That basically happened to me because I was a featured extra, I guess.
Right. I didn't have a car at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had no way to get down there.
I was crashing with Garifo when I was playing a homeless guy on that.
And then they just put me on the IMDb page, and I never said that I was even going to do it.
Funny story. I was crashing with Garifo, and one of the PAs at the Grips was crashing. He had an air mattress, and me and Griffer were sleeping in the same bed.
Mhm.
Now we were foot to face,
Mhm.
so it wasn't weird. But I remember we got in a fight, and it wasn't like we got in a fight. It was just like, I don't know if I want to stay with you tonight. We're just kind of arguing, and I want to argue. And then I crashed with somebody else that night because I didn't have a car. So, so then I remember the next day on set, and he goes, "I missed you last night. Come back." But oh god, me and him, we had a fight too. I remember it said like or something like, "Bob, I call you all the time." I'm like, "You never call me." He's like, "I call you every day. Look," and I'm like, "I'm sorry, I wasn't getting them." But it was funny because on Booted is how I met Mark Mackner. And another great friend of mine, Brian Anthony Wilson. I both met on the set of Booted.
Yeah, I don't think I know that person.
Oh, Brian Anthony is one of the most talented and most established people I know. I mean, this guy, he does this for a living. He's in 19 episodes of The Wire, and he's in so many big films and TV shows.
Right. I mean, I might know him.
Yeah, you'll recognize him.
I mean, I might know. We might have met. We might know each other, but I'm so bad with names.
But two very good close friends. It was cool to have met there and met Mark. Like Mark, I met him there and I didn't talk to him for years. And when we reconnected, it was funny because the first time I saw him since Booted was at the Half-Life horror premiere.
Well, he also like Mark kind of rolls in circles where he gets cool opportunities. Like he did that movie with Kane Hodder and
Death House.
He got a cool opportunity to be a part of that project.
I heard he was late and everybody was pissed or something.
Oh, what a dick. What an asshole.
I heard Jay was pissed because Mark showed up late.
Whose movie was that?
Well, Jay Green was the stunt choreographer.
Oh, okay, cool.
So, it's funny because another friend, Nicole Sinaglia, she moved to LA years ago. We were friends for a while, and they ended up recasting her in Booted. That's why they reshot the movie, and I wasn't in the reshoots because they shot it with somebody else.
Well, I think that what I was mostly trying to say was for Booted, there was a falling out between Joe and Sean and the like no footing crew.
Yeah, and Sean and Joe ended up making a movie about the falling out called The Independents.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And they instead of a film, it was a hockey team.
Okay.
And I never ended up seeing it, but I remember I think that's when me and Sean reconnected was when he was working on that.
Okay.
But I forget what I was saying about Booted. With Jay, because Jay was he played a wrestler in Daisy Durkin's 3.
Okay.
And he wrestled Phil. How do you say his name? Not Booker.
Phil Boucher.
Boucher, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And they did a scene together.
Uh-huh.
They did a match together. And my God, I could tell that Jay's not a wrestler because once he took that bump.
Well, Phil doesn't wrestle anymore.
No, he doesn't either.
I haven't seen him wrestle since probably 2005, 2007, maybe.
He's got a good presence too, though.
Yeah, he's like a mailman or something, right?
Is he? He ended up giving me a ride back to Delaware County, and I'm like, he was giving me and Mark a ride back to the city, and I said, "If you're going to Springfield, can I go all the way with you?" And he goes, "We just met, but okay."
Well, I remember I have pretty limited interactions with him. I know that the few times I met him was my friend Aaron Gainey. Also he's the guy who I know who Dan Levy, is that his name?
Bob Levy.
Yeah. Okay. Bob Levy. That the reason I had heard his name was through Aaron. Aaron was in a tag team called the Nigerian Nightmares. Have you ever heard of them?
No.
They were like two real heavy black dudes. And they were like doing like the kind of like Kamala sort of.
Oh, okay.
Like Abdullah the Butcher sort of characters. And they wrestled Phil and Chris Ansert at the arena for, it was called like Velocity. It was something like, it was run by the guy who owned the arena. So they were just like, and booked by Adam Flash.
You know how much I wish Chikara was still at the old ECW building when I was training there. How cool that would have been.
You weren't training there when they were at the arena?
No, I was there after they moved to their location now.
Okay.
Still great location. Once again, it's like
it looks cool.
Yeah, it's still like, it used to be like an auto shop. And it's weird, like, where a lot of these wrestling gyms are at, where it's just like all these auto shops, and then you see the Chikara logo right there.
Right. Yeah. I used to train at Chikara in 06 when they were still at the arena. The building they're at now, my friends who are New York comedians were running a web series, and they wanted to do a thing where something had to do with wrestling. So I set something up for.
I think I watched what you're talking about.
It was Chris Crespo, Matt Maron.
I remember watching
hand jobs.
Yeah, I remember watching something that's similar to what you're talking about. I wonder if that's.
So I remember I set that up with Quack. I was setting that up with Quack for those guys to film, and I was supposed to be there, but I didn't show up.
I actually read Quack's book.
Okay, yeah, I read some of like his first book.
Yeah, the one about I wanted to read Secret Identity, but I read that was autobiography. I read the one on basically that was like how to be a wrestler. So I decided to read it before I met him. And then so I read the book and then I started training with him.
Right.
It was cool, man. I got to work with some people I've always admired. I have no regrets. The only regret I have is not starting sooner, because I would have kept doing it.
Right.
But I mean, I'm glad I gave it a shot.
Dude, it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
And it's also, dude, sometimes I have to like tell people who are real nice and real good people, you're too nice for this business.
Yeah.
Don't get in it. Dude, wrestling, you can give your whole heart to wrestling, and wrestling will give you nothing back.
Yeah. Well, what my goal was? 3 matches. I didn't, I wasn't thinking I was going to be in WWE or anything.
Right.
I said, if I get 3 matches, I'll be happy.
I've told this story on here a bunch of times, but I'll tell it again. I was at my gym, and I saw a guy wearing like a collar and elbow t-shirt, which is like Al Snow's clothing brand.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah. I was like talking to him, and I was like, oh yeah, like are you a big fan of Al Snow and like all that stuff? And he's like, oh, I'm sponsored by Collar and Elbow, which it's a scam anyway.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh really? You're a wrestler? And he was like, no, I want to be though. And I was like, and he was like, you're Cory Kastle, right? And I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, we're friends on Facebook. Okay, cool. And he was like, and I was asking him more. I was like, what kind of goals do you have for wrestling? And he was like, oh, I'm going to be in the WWE. And I was like, and you haven't started training yet? And he's like, no, I want to get my body in better shape. And I said, how old are you? And he said, 28.
Oh, geez.
And I was like, and you still think you're going to be in WWE? I was like, I started doing this when I was 14. You think I never made it because I didn't want to? Like,
well, I mean,
in the back of my head, but it was more about thinking, damn, the delusions are real strong on some folk.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I remember, WWE, from what I was told by someone, was they won't look at you if you're over 40.
If you're over 33,
yeah,
they won't look at you.
Well, that's why, like, I was 32 when I started, and I'm like, even if 40s, like, am I going to make it as a wrestler in 7 years? I mean, It took me, I barely got any training in that 1 year, because I was with Chikara, and then before the first class ended, it was when I tore my shoulder and got a concussion.
Right.
I mean, the first week I got a pinched nerve in my neck.
Right.
So it's like, I mean, it was a struggle, and being someone, I wasn't in the best shape of my life, and I wasn't as young as I used to. Well, nobody.
No one's as young as they used to be.
But I mean, if I would have done it when I was 22, it'd be a whole different story, because I would have still kept.
It takes a whole lot of. It takes.
But
a
I didn't
whole
have
lot
the
of other
discipline when I
work
was 22.
Besides just the in-ring
Yeah.
stuff. It takes it's a whole sacrifice.
Well, I mean, when I was 22, I wasn't as good a performer as I am now, and I didn't have the discipline, and I didn't exercise and work out and eat as well as I do now. I mean, hell, I was talking, I used to eat 2 Bahama Mama chili cheese dogs from 7-Eleven every day, and that's when I was in shape. So it's like, I was in better shape then, but I have a lot more muscle now.
Right.
So it's like, I mean, yeah, if I did it when I was 22,
Well,
would I have made it? No, because I was a different person then. I didn't have what it takes back then.
At 22, you're still getting all that free testosterone.
Yeah. But like now that I'm 33, like mentally and all that, I mean, I have what it takes, but physically I don't, because I'm 33. I'm not old, but my body's not what it was 10 years ago.
Well, it's also, what's logical, like you got to be reasonable about this.
Well,
like,
I mean, I got a concussion, was trying to do the front flip and landing on the top of my head, DDTing myself. I could have broke my neck right there.
Yeah.
I mean,
let's be grateful that you didn't.
Yeah. And I could have got paralyzed just from that.
Right.
Like most of my body weight landed on my top of my head.
Right.
That's how I got a concussion. And man, that train ride back was not fun with a concussion kicked in. I'm sure you've had your share of concussions.
Oh yeah.
As well.
Yeah. I mean, I think the more and more I'm thinking about it, like if I'm looking back retrospectively, I mean, if I'm looking back and I'm going like, let's look at the first few years that I was like in CZW when I started, right? I remember getting back, and I can remember the old locker room in the ECW arena, like when it was still like a shitty little, like it was a shitty back room with these old ass tables, and always after every match being like, wow, I don't know where I am. Like I must have been really concussed. I don't know what happened, but I remember like back then to get pops, you always had to get a pop. Somebody had to drop you on your head.
Yeah.
Like you'd have to be willing to take a lot of crazy shit. And I did. And I used to like, people would stiff the shit out of me and I would go, oh, well, it's getting a good pop, so it doesn't matter. Like, dude, I remember one match I had with Joker and Sabian, whereas
cool.
me and Niles, and they beat the shit out of me so bad, and I just took it, and I was happy to take it. But like thinking back on that now, that was like assault. They fucked me up like that. I fully got taken advantage of. But I was there for it.
It's funny too, because I remember when I talk about my injuries, and I said I had 2 injuries when it was really 5, because you kind of disregard the ones that aren't crippling.
Well, you forget them too, because so much other stuff has happened since.
I forgot about the concussion. I'm like, oh, I tore my shoulder, and it's funny. You know how I tore my shoulder? Was doing a handstand on the turnbuckle. Out of all the things you do in the ring, that's how I tore it.
We were trying to do it like up and over.
Yeah, when you get my legs straight up, touch, but I think it was the impact is what hurt my shoulder. And then the ribs, I tell you, the ribs when I hit the ropes, and I think the pinched nerve in my neck was from doing a bump wrong.
One of those Skyda seminars that they did at Chikara.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet Skyda when he came in?
No, I didn't.
So one of the Skyda seminars, they would make you do this drill where like someone would be kind of like half bent over in front of you, and you had to like run up on them and scoop under their stomach and like flip over their back and like nip up in the air and like land on your feet. That was like one of the drills that they were doing. And I was wearing wrestling boots at the time, and I did that off of Danny Havoc. I did that. He was also training there at the same time.
Cool.
And I did that. I was doing that, and as soon as I hit, like, landed on my feet, my left ankle turned completely sideways, and I was out. I was done.
I have a friend, Echo Endless, and she's with CZW now. I don't know what her name's now, but
I think that's her name.
Yeah, and she really did some serious damage to her ankle. She broke her ankle, tons of surgeries, took her years to get back in the ring, and it was doing a bump. Something that you didn't think doing a bump you'd break your ankle.
Right.
I mean, because she jumped off, in a weird way, because it's like the slightest movement can really change everything.
Well, with bumping too, sometimes it's like sometimes it's like what you're wearing on your feet makes a lot of the difference. Like Like, you know, those amateur wrestling shoes.
Mhm.
If you take a flip bump and you're wearing those and you're not landing right, you're messing your heels up.
Yeah, and I had to get the widest pair that ASICs made because I have the most fucked up feet. I wear 13 double wides and I got like the flattest feet in the world. So it's like, man, it was a miracle that I fit into those damn things.
But like, am I right with like taking bumps, like you landing on your heels weird? It can mess you up.
Well, I know Echo, she had to end up when she went to CZ. So she started training at CZW after she met DJ on the set of Daisy Durkins. And I cast her in Daisy Durkins. So she, I know when she started training at CZW, at that point, it was after her surgeries and all that. And she had to wear the boots all the time because she had to protect her ankle.
Right.
So she couldn't wrestle in amateur wrestling school. She had to wrestle in boots.
Right.
So it's like, you know, I mean, there's, you gotta, I mean, there's only so much you can do to protect yourself.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, even like knee pads, elbow pads. I mean, I don't think I've ever really seen anybody have elbow pads, you know, when I was training.
Well, I don't know if you knew this about me, and then this is probably talked about so many times on the podcast, but it makes more sense now because we're talking about zombies. We were talking a lot about zombies. Can you see that pin right there? It looks like the Obama campaign poster, but it's a zombie and it says brains on it.
Oh yeah, I have that. I have the poster of that in my room.
Yeah, I have the magnet of it on my fridge too. So I had to have brain surgery in 2011. I had that with me, that the zombie pin, pinned to my hospital gown while I was getting the brain surgery.
Wow.
And then when I left wrestling, I left wrestling for 13 months. And I came back to wrestling, and it's like, oh, you realize like how big of a risk with every time I'm getting, and we're talking about even bumps, the little, how much they're, you know, how much you're risking taking a bump. But I had to get back in because I had to go, this is my decision to make, and it has to be on my terms.
Yeah.
I can't let some injury take me out forever. I gotta determine whether I'm in it or not. So now, you know, I'm pretty limited on the bookings that I take.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like I got
so
that
you're kind of like semi-retired now.
Kind of. I mean, like I'll do like maybe 3 shows a month.
Yeah, because I mean, like Quack is semi-retired, and I didn't even know until I went to one of his shows and he was wrestling, and I watched him. You know, I think his elbow like broke off of his arm.
Oh wow.
He like oh god, it was that was a crazy match. But it's just like I don't even know if he's wrestled since. I mean, I don't know if he's still.
Right.
I thought he was retired, and then I'm like, I show up to a show because he used to give us tickets when we trained there,
right.
And I'm like, oh look, I guess he's still wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, I text with him sometimes, and we talk about him coming over here and hanging with me and doing an episode. So
he's a very cool guy.
He's so well spoken. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
He's incredibly well spoken, very articulate.
No matter what, he's talking like he's in front of an audience.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you just be one-on-one and he's just like
he's cut a promo.
It's the way he's talking. It's just like it's so like almost rehearsed when it's not.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my god, you know, Solo Darling really kicked my ass when I was training there.
Yeah.
She's like a drill sergeant.
I met her once at a show in Delaware. She was dating Jimmy Jacobs at the time, and I saw Jimmy, and that was the first time I had seen him since like 2003 probably. And we were catching up a little bit, and he was like, he was like, dude, I can't believe how like you're a grown man now, because we're the same age. So the last time we saw each other, we were kids. And he was like, I was like, what are you doing with yourself these days? And he's like, oh, I'm a writer for WWE. And I was like, oh, you are? I knew he was, but I was selling it like, what? No way. But like, I don't feel like anyone, I don't want to make anyone ever feel like I'm acting a different way because they are somebody or doing, like, everybody's the same. We all have our own stuff going on. We all have like we can recognize somebody who's politicking on us or something like that. If I understand like human nature, like I believe I do, I gotta be pretty cautious.
Mm.
And I definitely don't want to change who I am or how I talk or how I behave based around someone's clout.
Well, I think I knew Nick. Me and Nick were friends for about a year until I told him I was a fan.
Right.
I'm like, did I ever tell you that I was a fan? And he goes, no. I'm like, well, yeah, I don't. I mean, even, it's funny. So Daisy Durkins 3 was starring Nadia White, who's a porn star.
Mm-hmm.
I am a huge fan of porn.
Mm-hmm.
I am a supporter, an advocate, a fan,
a supporter.
A supporter. So I didn't want her to know. Mm-hmm. So like I didn't want to fanboy out because to me, porn star, I don't know, they're the biggest celebrities of them all for me.
Right.
But so especially when I found out, like, oh my God, I saw a picture of her and Lauren Phillips. I want to ask so many questions. Oh, she did a scene with Corey Chase. Like I was just trying to like really play it off, like porn. Yeah, I heard about it. Yeah, I heard that's a thing, porn. Yeah, I was checking that out. Like
one of these days, I'll get around to it.
But I didn't want her to like, I was a complete fanboy. And even with Nick, like, Nick never knew I was a fan of him before we met.
Right.
But nobody wants to be that guy.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, it's not, dude, I'm the same as everybody else. Like the same as you're the same as everybody else. It's like, I'm not going to treat you any differently because we're on different levels or any, like none of that is going to factor in, because if you lose your sincerity, what is your character? If you're going to compromise if you're going to compromise who you are, your morals are compromised.
I feel like it's, somebody said to me recently. So my stage, I gave myself a stage name.
You did?
As a comedian.
What is that?
Blunt Bob.
Is that what you do? You do comedy as Blunt Bob?
Yeah, and even my YouTube channel is the Blunt Bob Experience.
Okay.
So Blunt Bob is has nothing to do with weed. It's
because you're a blunt person.
I'm very blunt. I'm very honest. I mean, I'm like Jim Carrey and Liar. I pretty much, I'm just Mr. Full Disclosure. So that's who I am, and that's kind of my character, is being blunt and kind of just, even like when we were doing the sketches, that's my character, is just kind of straight up and blunt and not even sometimes just like yeah like shortened to the point sometimes. But my one friend, my best friend Alex Majakis, who's also a comedian, he said something to me like, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Blunt Bob." And he goes, "No, that's not what I meant." I said, "No, that is what you meant."
Right.
Because that name, sums up who I am. And so I would say I gave myself the stage name to kind of separate being a filmmaker and being a performer.
Right.
When I was doing my podcast, I was Blunt Bob. Doing my YouTube channel, I'm Blunt Bob. When I'm on stage, I'm Blunt Bob. When I'm making a movie, I guess I'm Bob Kaplan. But
it's funny that I associate Blunt Bob with Blunt Man and Chronic and Kevin Smith.
Blunt Bob is also a haircut.
No, I didn't know.
Yeah, I found that out a while after.
I've heard of a Bob. That's like a women's haircut.
It's funny because if you type Blunt Bob and YouTube, you'll probably get the haircut tutorials. If you type the Blunt Bob Experience, you'll get me. And then the first video is me throwing up into a bucket. But it's a very blunt thing to do. But I mean, I feel like my persona on stage is still who I am.
Right. So
like I'm not anyone who I'm not, is a way to put it. Like if I'm on stage, that's who I am. If I'm talking to you, that's who I am. Like there's no other persona. There's no part of me that's different than the rest. There's no part of me that's.
Do you have any like upcoming shows, or do you hit mics or anything?
I haven't. I'll tell you. Last thing I did was Philly's Funniest. I was talking about hitting up a mic tonight with Majakis, but I don't think I'm going to. And I've been wanting to go back and do Fenris's mic. Okay. Because he does one like once a month.
And the bar
13 or something. Yeah. I've done shows with him at two different places. I forget which one's which. They're both in Delaware.
Yeah. I've done some of his shows here in Philly, and then I've done the Delaware mic a couple times.
And now I'm starting to do the Boylesque again with Envoûté. I put on a corset back in December.
That's Fenris's burlesque show?
No, it's my buddy Adam. I'm actually a co-founder of Envoûté, which is a pretty well-known burlesque group in Philly now. It's kind of how I fell in, because Fenris does have a lot of burlesque. He does a lot of burlesque stuff as well.
Mhm.
He does stuff with Junebug and a lot of other burlesque dancers. I think it like is it at Connie's? I think he does stuff at Connie's. And then what's the other place? Bob and Barbara's, I think, is the other that he does shows there. But like, yeah, that's, you know, a lot of times we've known each other through the burlesque because we're both comedians who do burlesque. But I started out when I met Adam, one of my best friends. He said, I'm starting a burlesque group. And I said, well, I'm a comedian. Do you need a host? And he said, do you mind squeezing into a corset and doing a little dance? And I said, sure. And that was 5 minutes of meeting him. And then next thing I know, we ended up doing that as its own show for a couple of years in a row. Boy Less Bob, where, like, you know, I would headline, but I would have to wear a corset and dance and shit.
Well, have you thought, I mean, Punchline does drag brunches on Sundays.
I've been wanting
think about like reaching out and trying to get booked to Punchline, dude. I would it would be a funny thing just to say like, oh, I had to put on a dress just to get booked to Punchline.
It's funny because you mentioned but before the show, you know, I'm, you know, talking to your girlfriend about you know, the web series.
Right.
She just played Punchline, didn't she?
Both of us did.
Yeah, because I remember seeing she posted a video the other night. Yeah. I remember seeing that. Yeah. So it was funny because I was seeing, it's funny how everything comes full circle because I remember seeing her video and thinking about Punchline, and then you mentioning it. You mentioned her earlier too.
Yeah.
It's always weird how that.
It's so funny, man. Like when
you hit me up and I said to Mark, do you know Cory Kastle? He goes, do I know Cory Kastle? And it was funny because I didn't realize, I knew you as a wrestler, but I didn't realize that was also you in Half-Life Horror.
That was probably before I ever started getting on stage and doing stand-up.
Yeah.
Like that was a few years probably before I ever got on. Maybe, I don't know. What year was it?
I want to say, so this is saying 2016.
I think it might have been 2008 when we made it, when we made the movie. Mark, if you're listening, sorry if I don't know the exact answer. It might have been 2007 or 2008 when we made Half-Life.
Yeah, because I remember when I saw it at the premiere, I think he said he shot it 5 years prior.
Okay.
No, maybe more, because I think at that time he shot Daisy 2 5 years prior.
Mm-hmm. So
maybe Half-Life was even 2008 makes sense.
I started hitting open mics for the first time in 2008. That was when I first got on stage. So this might have been right around the time when I first started doing stand-up comedy.
Probably, you know, it's funny because it's probably around the same time as me. It might have been like 2009 when I was opening for Levy.
Yeah, maybe see about getting booked on some of his shows again. Have you thought about opening that connection back up?
Yeah, I wanted to see if you wanted to open for me now. But I don't want to say anything bad about Bob.
I don't, dude. Like I said, I don't have anything to say one way or the other. I just know him through my friend Aaron.
All right, Bob Levy is one of the best insult comics in the history of comedy, and his, you know, I talked about me being the same person on stage and off stage. I think Bob kind of has that same thing going on,
right?
So he might not be the easiest person to get along with at times.
Well, it's weird, man. Like I have relationships like that in wrestling, right? In wrestling, there's people who are always in promo cutting mode, and it's like you wanna talk to me so that you can. Well, I've watched you do it to a million people.
Yeah,
you're gonna bring up dirt sheet shit to people, like stuff you read about them on the dirt sheets, as a way to insult them, to get yourself over with the people in the locker room. And it's like, bro, you know, I don't talk to you because I don't want to have to, I can't have a relationship with the you. It's like the gimmick you.
Yeah.
You gotta get outside of that gimmick you and just be the you.
Well, it's funny because I had several characters I was working on for when I started wrestling. And then I ended up going with a character that me and Mark created as a character in the film. We ended up turning that into the character I was going to do, which was, you know, Mark's got a luchador wrestler as a regular, you know, as a character in all his work called El Gaucho.
Right.
So I came up with it. So this is a day I was shemping, where it's basically I had to be a stand-in for several characters, and I was already a character in the movie. So when I put my luchador mask on that I owned, I bought in Mexico, and I had to do a voice so I could be a different character, so they wouldn't know I was also. I basically played Paul Heyman, by the way, in the show. The character is based on Manny Murderously. So the only accent I could do was like a South Philly Italian accent because my mom's from South Philly. She's a South Philly Italian. So I came up with the name as El Guido. As that character, and then we had El Guido wrestle that day at CZW for part of the movie, and that was gonna be my character. Was El Guido is basically a luchador who can't do any acrobatics stuff because he eats too much spaghetti. That was Mark's backstory for the character.
That's funny.
And it was like, El Guido, and I would even like, I'll call it Mark. I'm like, Macna, you rat bastard motherfucker. Said I would always like to trash talk him in the El Guido voice.
That's funny. So, this has kind of been like a departure from what the podcast normally is. I mean, not normally, because I mean it's always just a chill kind of conversation. Yeah. But a lot of times I'll try to get into the ideas of like where you've been and where you're heading, what's like kind of helped you evolve to be a better version of yourself. To just constantly, like, of course, it's called evolving. So, like, what kind of stuff inspires you to want to be better? And
well, I feel like we've still discussed that in a way,
right?
Even talking about who I was when I first started out, as a filmmaker was meeting Joe and Sean, and as a comedian is opening for Bob Levy into what I'm doing now. And even as a comedian, I mean, my comedy career has turned to me on YouTube eating weird things.
Right.
I mean, I brought hot sauce just in case you wanted me to eat something.
No, I don't need you to do any stunts.
And Pepto. But that's what I said to Mark. I said any normal person doesn't need to make sure they have Pepto-Bismol, when they're going on a podcast. But I just a Boy Scout always prepared. But so it's like, things have not turned out the way I wanted them to. I never thought I'd be on YouTube eating fish flavored candy canes and throwing up bananas and Sprite. But I would say, man, you gotta, like Warren Zevon said, roll with the punches, because it's like you just figure out. Like there was a time I wanted to write the great American novel, and now I want to tell a story about a fucking dude killing Satanists.
Right.
I mean, so it's like, don't make plans, or because you don't know where it's gonna be. I mean, when I started out, I wanted to make romantic comedies,
right?
More like American Pie type stuff. But in a way, that's it. And now I do horror comedy.
Well, I think the more and more I think about it, the more and more I try to search for what's my future. It always goes to like some kind of comedy acting.
Yeah.
I just think of like creating some kind of comedy acting situation, some sort of, I keep saying like sitcom acting. I want to do that because it would ideally be a TV credit that could let me tour and doing stand up on tour, and like writing for sitcoms. That just all feels like it's right on brand with what I am.
Eventually I'm going to be looking for writers for the web series because I feel like I can't write the whole series alone.
Well, I say this on every episode, and I really mean this. If I can be a resource to you in any way, I'm happy to do it. Even if you need a friend, and I say it, I want anybody listening too. If you need somebody to give you judgment-free conversation, there's absolutely no way that you can't feel anything but safe, because I'm not going to say, why don't you this? Why don't you that?
Man, I had this weird fucking dream last night that's really messing with me. No, I did, but I'm just kidding.
No, do you want to tell me about it?
Yeah, I feel like I've been starting to have more dreams with this ex-girlfriend, I haven't even thought about in years. It's weird that she keeps popping up. And it was someone like, it was barely a thing. Oh, good. Yeah. Because it's getting dark in here. Now it's getting dark. I'm talking about my nightmares. No, I'm kidding too. No, but I mean, I'm telling the truth because I'm always telling the truth. I would never it's weird because I don't even need to make stuff up.
Right.
If you want, what's been bothering you, Bob? Well, you know what? It's really easy for me to answer. And you know, I'll tell you the one thing I hate the most is when people say honesty is the best policy. Because people say, you know, I always say honesty is my most important thing, and they'll be like, it's the best. I hear this on Tinder all the time. It's the best policy. I'm like, I really fucking hate that line.
You know, to call something a policy, maybe I think that kind of tries to regiment something so much. Like it's not something to structure out. Just be an honest, sincere, genuine person. And like not talk about what your policies are.
Well, you know, somebody even said to me too. They said I'm a nice, honest person. I said, "There's no fucking thing.
And you can't call yourself nice.
You can't be nice and you can't be honest. You can't be the both things.
It's like giving yourself a nickname. You gotta remain humble.
I'm an asshole.
I can't say I'm funny. I can have other people tell me that I'm funny, but I can't say
absolutely.
I'm funny.
I agree with that. I could say I'm blunt. And I could say, I feel like I probably am one of the dirtiest comedians in Philly. I mean, that could be a good thing or a bad thing. You never know. Because even when I did Philly's Funniest, my brother's girlfriend says, you were the dirtiest one there. And I'm like, I did all my clean material. That was my clean set. And I was the dirtiest one there.
The last time I did Philly's Funniest, dude.
I do it for the photos. I don't like a lot of people do it for the video. Because the guy who films the videos, he comes up to me.
Dorian,
yeah. I pissed him off. And I don't know why.
I love that
because he says, "Oh no," because all right. So you know, they came in the green room and they said, "Oh, I'll be filming. Let me know if you want me to film you."
Right.
Does anyone want me to film you? Raise your hand. Marissa goes, "I'm taking photos. Let me know, or raise your hand if you want to." Photos. So I didn't raise my hand for Dorian, but I said to Marissa, I said, I would like the photos.
Right.
Can I Venmo you the money? Because I don't have any cash on me. And then I was talking to her about kind of stuff like we're talking about, just like friend to friend type stuff. Oh, you know this person. We were talking about this. And then Dorian comes up and says, hey, man, you want me to film your set? And I said, no, I don't want evidence. And then he looked kind of offended. And I don't know. Because I don't know. I'm not a big fan of filming my sets.
Well, it's weird because it's like some people do it for like it's weird. Like because I will record it so I can listen back to it. Like I'll record the audio of it and I'll listen to it on my drive home. Like that is something I always do.
I did do the world's first ever selfie set at a Fenris show.
Okay. The world's first.
I don't know I don't know anybody else who did a selfie set.
Okay.
Anybody else that filmed their set selfie mode like this the whole time?
Oh man, that's distracting. but it's weird. Like if I go somewhere and like somebody I know is there, and like they're like, hey, can you record my set for me? I'm like, okay. Can you take pictures for me? Can you take pictures and send them to me? Because I'd rather have the pictures.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted the pictures from Marissa, and I didn't want the video from what is it, Dorian? Dorian. Well, you know another thing too, because it was only a 5-minute set. Why do I really care?
Right.
If I'm doing 20, because I've recorded a comedy album. I did a half an hour set. I paid $100 for them to use the equipment at the truck, thousands of dollar equipment. I never did anything with it.
Yeah.
But
I feel like the experience of getting like to do 20 minutes to a half hour, the experience of that means more to me than recording that.
Me too.
Because like it doesn't translate as well sometimes. And it's really like, I think my fear goes back to this. Like when I first had started, I was like, my material is so original that I don't want someone to take it.
I feel the same way. I don't want to put my stuff online because I feel like somebody's going to take my material. And there's also a reason why I don't watch comedy.
Oh, I watch comedy like nonstop.
Yeah. Well, a lot of comedians do, a lot of people do. Right. And I don't want to be too influenced. So I limit myself to comedians that I want to influence me.
Did you watch the last Burr special?
No.
Bill Burr special? Paper Tiger? So good.
I watch my two favorite comedians are the only two comedians I really watch. Brian Scalero, I watch a good amount of. He's one of my favorite comedians, and we became friends through Facebook. We talk a good amount. It's really cool. I remember the day of the Dollface premiere, he messaged me that morning saying good luck. But I mean, like my favorite comedian of all time is Bob Saget. And not even the fact that he's the dirtiest comedian alive, just because I feel like we have the same sense of humor at the stream of consciousness. But on another one is Eddie Pepitone. And he's only a comic that you know of if you're a comedian.
Right. I know Eddie.
Yeah. And not a lot of people know who Eddie Pepitone is.
We've had a few interactions on Twitter.
Yeah. I love when he does his bits when he reads his tweets.
Right.
Eddie's one of my favorites. And he's a big influence because there's a lot of things about his presence that I'm trying to be more like.
But it's not just about his stand-up too. It's like you can see him like on like Marin, like he was on an episode.
Oh
of Marin.
yeah.
Like a couple appearences on Louis and
when he's on Marin and Rogan and stuff, he gets fucking philosophical.
Right. But I'm not talking about the podcast. I'm talking about the show Marin.
Oh yeah.
But he was great as a podcast guest too. WTF. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I remember my parents were watching King of Queens, and he had a small role, and my dad said to my mom, "Oh, that's Bob's favorite comedian," and she's like, "That guy." Oh my god! Do you ever see the YouTube channel? I think it's on Nerdist, Comedy Without a Net, or the No Set List, or something. I forget what it's called exactly.
Okay.
It's basically when comedians go up, where their set list they get when they're up there. So basically, a screen shows up and tells them the name of each joke. And they don't know until they get up there what the name of the joke's going to be.
Yeah. I've heard of that, but I don't think I've ever seen
his. Was my favorite. But I mean, Dana Gould, he was fantastic on it.
Yeah.
Dana Gould is one of the best
dude.
writers.
I saw him at Helium, dude. He was so good.
He's such a, like his show Standing Against Evil, man. He needs to do more writing too, because he's such a great writer as well. But then Robin Williams did a good one. And then Saul, Better Call Saul, Bob Odenkirk. He was terrible. It was sad because I'm a big fan of his and just wasn't good. And there's comedians out there like Jeff Garlin, like, man, I want to like him.
Yeah.
And whenever I see his comedy,
Netflix special was pretty good though.
Yeah, I feel like
was it Netflix or HBO? But his last stand-up was.
I heard he's gotten better, but when I saw stuff early in his career, I'm like, I'm watching it. I'm like, he's so likable, but he's so not funny.
It's so funny too. Like, you could tell the underscoring theme of Jeff's last special was like, I'm kind of a big deal. Like he was underscoring. I'm kind of a millionaire. I've associated with some big ass successful shows.
All right, look at the two shows he's on right now are huge.
Yeah. Curb and Goldberg's. Yeah.
Well, what's funny? When he worked on Goldberg's, he told them, I am available to do this, whenever. But as soon as Larry calls me, Curb comes first.
Right.
And that's cool, man. That's cool. Larry David has that influence on people.
These are hugely successful shows, both of them. Like both hit syndication.
Do you mean Goldberg's and Curb, or you mean Seinfeld and
Curb? Both Goldberg's and Curb. Seinfeld is a whole other spectrum. Like that's a whole other stratosphere.
Well, saying Seinfeld's the best sitcom of all time is like saying the Beatles are the best band of all time.
I mean,
they shouldn't even be considered in the category.
I never really liked this show, Seinfeld. I like Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah.
And I think that there are moments in the show Seinfeld.
He's probably the first comedian I ever got into as a kid.
I liked his comedy. I didn't like the show. I think the premise of it was like, I liked the fact that like he was living as a comedian, but like inside of that would never acknowledge.
To be completely honest though, if I were to say the greatest sitcom of all time would probably be All in the Family.
Well, Norman Lear's a genius.
Yeah. And you know what else I loved about sitcoms back then was they had, once again, back to the shared universe.
Yeah.
All the sitcoms kind of crossed over and spun off of each other.
And it was like, it was really without a net.
Yeah.
It was really like, this is all first dose of like this kind of
Maude,
humor.
The Jeffersons, Good Times, All in the Family. I mean, they all had characters that crossed over from all each other's shows.
Right.
Jeffersons is a spinoff of All in the Family.
I remember. Do you remember the show Empty Nest?
Yes.
They did a crossover on something. I can't remember.
Well, also, another thing, Family Matters and Full House. But I think Family Matters, I think Urkel was on a few different shows other than just Full House.
Whatever happened to predictability?
Man, what's fucking funny is them bringing back Full House. I'm like, who wants to see Bob Saget playing Danny Tanner again?
Right.
After telling the dirtiest jokes ever told for years. And who wants to see John Stamos as Uncle Jesse after he fucked most of Hollywood?
Right. Well,
I never watched the new Full House.
It was mostly based off. I didn't watch the show either.
Kids, right?
It was mostly based off of DJ.
DJ, yeah, that's what I meant. DJ.
It was based off of DJ and her kids, and like Kimmy and Stephanie and them kind of having kids, and it was more based on their kids than it was based on any of the old characters. We need that? It was for a new generation. For a new generation. It was. I mean, it's not for you.
They did that with Gilmore Girls too, didn't they?
I don't know.
Bring back. I'm okay with you bringing back Gilmore Girls.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good show.
My biggest thing about Gilmore Girls is like it was too funny. Like it was too like these regular ass people wouldn't be this funny. Right.
It had Sebastian Bach though.
Yeah.
Who is one of my favorite people in the world. Talk about people being full of themselves, and I love him for that. He named his daughter Sebastiana.
That's pretty egomaniacal.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to name your son Junior, but to name your daughter Sebastiana. And I actually knew somebody who was her teacher, which was really cool. Somebody I work with at the Literary Journal. I'm an editor for.
Well, normally I'm going to start wrapping up.
Yeah.
And the way I would do that was I would say, hypothetically, I'm giving you this podcast. This podcast is yours now. And it's going to be, this is the pilot episode of your new podcast, Evolving with Blunt Bob Kaplan. How would you wrap the whole thing up in a pretty little bow in a minute, like Jerry Springer's Final Thought type of way?
It's funny because I had a podcast for about 15 episodes, and it turned up just being more work than it was worth at the time. But to wrap up, so I'm introducing a hypothetical new podcast, or I'm wrapping up everything.
Just this episode. I mean, just going over this episode.
I don't want to say anything cliche like don't take your life too seriously or don't give up on your dreams. At the end of the day, just be your fucking self, accept who you are. And if you want to do something, just fucking do it. I was 32 years old and everybody told me I wasn't gonna go far with the wrestling, and I did not. But I don't care because I spent a few $100s I wish I still had. But I mean, I gave myself a chance.
Well, you never fully know exactly what you want until what you want has found you. And I think that.
But I tell you this, I still want to keep doing stunt work because I've been doing that for a long time.
Right.
So
it's a doorway that led you to where you want to be.
Yeah.
Came through that. So there's
I was doing stunt work before wrestling.
But you've made some new connections. You got some new resources. I'm always fascinated with resources. And the funny thing is like the fact that we know so many people, and the way I know this person through this person, Nick Burke, because I introduced Nick Burke to Mark Mackner.
Yeah.
So I'm the resource for you that you've never met.
Well, look at, how I met Mark Mackner on a film that you auditioned for and ended up not doing.
Right.
So, I mean, everything's intertwined here.
Right.
But yeah, I would have never met Nick Burke. I would have never met Mark Mackner if I wasn't on Booted.
Right.
And it's just, you're credited, like you said, you're credited in the film.
I was. I think they took it off. But I think the video for like whatever the news story or the trailer or something is still on my IMDb page. But
you can actually see me a lot in that background.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think I've ever watched it, but I see that the title says that.
I can always say that was a long time ago because I had hair. But look at, the whole point of my web series right now is that this is about a guy who's 33. He's bald. He's overweight. He has high blood pressure, and nothing is going to stop him from surviving the night. So if I'm going to, talk about something, it's just like, you know what? I'm 33. I'm bald. I'm overweight. I have high blood pressure. But you know what? I'm not going to try to change who I am. I'm going to try to get in better shape for sure. Will I'll probably always be a little chunky.
Mhm.
You know, I'm never gonna have hair again.
Mhm.
But you know what? Would I change anything? Yeah, I would probably change every choice I've ever made. But but I'm happy with where I'm at now. And you know what? I mean, I'm doing a web series, I'm doing a YouTube channel. You know, as long as I'm still working on something, I'm very happy. You know, I wish my regular life was, you know, as successful as my, you know, other life. Because everybody in this business has two lives.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, we spend the whole weekend filming and performing, and then we clock in the next day
Right.
on Monday.
Weekend warriors.
Yeah. So you know, I just, you know what? So if I'm gonna sum this up like a Jerry's final thoughts, I'm like, fuck it. It's like I was telling somebody last night who's, you know, talking about their stage fright and shit. It's just like, you know, my thing about stage fright is about anxiety, about performance anxiety. Yeah, you're not wrong. You're freaking out because that shit is scary.
Right. It's
that audience is watching everything you do.
Right. Being judged sucks.
Yeah.
And you're just opening yourself up to being judged for free.
This whole time I'm sitting there staring at your computer screen and seeing little squiggly, you know, little things out of my voice because this microphone is recording everything I'm saying. Right. So if I say one thing stupid, it's immortalized on the internet.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, you're not wrong.
Right.
But it's, do you want to do it?
Right.
Do you want to perform? Do you want to, you know, be on stage or be in the ring? And if you do, then do it.
Right.
All right. You'll get over it. You'll get used to it. It gets easier, but it never gets easy.
Right.
And you don't want it to get easy because if there's no challenge, there's no excitement.
Dude, things that come easy, like I always say, like easy isn't gonna get you what you want to do. Like you're not gonna be able to be who you want to be through taking the easy route.
Do you know how many times I could say that if I would have had this one conversation in the past differently, my life could be really great? Somebody asked me to write for SpongeBob. And anybody who knows me knows that if you say SpongeBob when I'm around, I'm gonna get mad. Right. Never talk about SpongeBob around me because I fucked up an opportunity to be a writer in SpongeBob. I could be having a great life right now if I would have said one thing differently. But you know what? Every journey is different. I don't know.
Hey man, I auditioned for the movie Holes when I was 17.
Did you really?
And I didn't get that.
Did you audition for the Shia LaBeouf part?
Yeah. No, not for the Shia LaBeouf part, but one of the parts. But I'm saying, like, well, how different would your life had been in any situation?
Yeah, but you didn't get the part because you weren't ready yet because you were still or you weren't right for the part or something.
Right.
I'm not a writer in SpongeBob because I said something stupid.
Right.
So it's like I fucked up.
But you've learned from that.
Yeah, and I still say stuff stupid every day. And there's plenty of people that don't want to work with me because, you know, they don't like the things I say to them. But I'm not going to change who I am. I'm just going to, you know, hopefully I just don't piss too many people off.
What fascinates me, and I say it all the time on here, the reason I wanted to start this podcast was mostly because I wanted to have things that outlive me. This audio is going to outlive both of us. And on the record, I'm going to say, you're the type of person I know I can continue to create and have fun with. And this is just the start. This is just the start. And on the record, this is you can point back to the moment, let's say in 5 years when we've, you know, had some fun together and made some cool things. You can go, this was the day we met and the day that it all started. Like a few years ago, I know my mom had she had burnt onto a CD some voicemails that were left on her phone from her mom who had passed.
Oh wow.
And she said, you know how when people pass away, you forget what their voice sounds like? And it automatically was like, I never want that. I don't ever want you to forget who I was or my voice sounded like. So not only can you hear what my voice sounds like, you can hear who I am. And who I am is somebody who wants to evolve constantly. So that's why I'm not just calling it Evolving with Cory Kastle because I'm on it. It's like you're hearing me becoming who I am going to be.
Well, if you're not evolving, you're dead.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean that in a literal sense and a metaphorical sense.
Yeah.
Because the second when you look in the mirror and you say, man, am I a good comedian, or man, am I a good actor? You stop evolving because you think you're at your best.
Right.
But if you're always challenging yourself and you're always questioning your own ability, you're always going to force yourself to get better.
Right. Well, it's what do you offer? What is that worth? And that's a question I have to keep asking myself. What do I offer? What is that worth? And do I deserve it? Do I deserve it? Yeah. So I'm going to continue to keep doing this. I'm going to have these conversations, and no matter, where life takes me, I'm going to continue evolving, and I'm going to continue having these conversations with new people and working with new people and creating together and shit.
162 episodes is no small feat. I did about 15 and had enough.
It's a 13 double wide. That's how big a feat it is.
Well, what's funny though? Even the fact that I did 15 episodes of my podcast.
Did you get that joke that I made?
Yeah, my feet was way more than I ever expected to do.
That's the knee slapping. Sorry, go ahead.
See, look at these. Oops, I dropped your bongo. But like I 15 episodes is way more than I ever expected to do. So I'm fine with that.
Right.
And that's the end of the day. It's just like, man, you can kick yourself in the ass. It's never going to do you any good. I mean, did I even make a dent in being a professional wrestler? No. Well,
like it goes back to something you said earlier. You said show don't say.
Show don't tell.
Show don't tell. That's how it is. Like I
which I don't actually agree with, to be honest with you. Something Hemingway came up with, because I don't think, but I think it's important to show don't tell. Sometimes you got to tell.
Right. Well, the way I look at it, and when I say it, is like I don't walk around telling people I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to start podcasting.
Oh yeah.
I would do it. And then you'll find out because I've shown you.
DDP says everything is 90%. 10% of life is what happens to you. 90% is how you react, adapt, and take action.
Me and Steve Dotson made a movie called The 90%, and it was based off of that. The title of the movie was based off of that saying. Yeah. So the main character in the movie kept going, life is 10% of what happens and 90% how you react to it. Life is, and like that was the movie we made called The 90%. Is probably the most fun I've ever had making a movie. And if we ever make a sequel to it, it will be called the 10%.
Yeah. Well, that was like, Bruce Campbell, what his first book was about, was that he thinks that, Bruce Willis is 1% of Hollywood, but 99% is all focusing on that 1%. So his book, If Chins Could Kill, is that 1% talking about the 99%.
Man,
we need to get into Bruce Campbell. I mean, like, you talk about Evil Dead. That's
yeah, that's an inspiration to do without talking about it first. Like really making those movies. It changed the game.
Sam Raimi was a 19-year-old kid who had no idea what he was doing, and what he ended up doing in the late 70s, which ended up becoming the early 80s, I believe, was when the movie was released, was have the biggest influence anyone could ever have on my life. And this is something that happened before I was born. Yeah. So it's like,
do you like his Spider-Man movies?
No.
No.
I love Sam Raimi, is still one of my favorite filmmakers. But no, I don't think Toby was a good choice. I think the directing of Spider-Man 2 was fucking awesome, because in Spider-Man 2, he went back to his old style. It felt more like Army of Darkness than it did, other Spider-Man. I would love for him to do it again. Spider-Man 3 is the biggest piece of shit in superhero history, but it's not his fault, because the studio really forced his hand on that one.
Dude, those are the movies that I began my infatuation with James Franco because of Spider-Man 2, probably.
Oh God, he was bad on him too, and then he's a great actor. He just it was just, I don't know, it was too, the studio was pushing Sam to make movies, to make a movie he shouldn't have really made, and that's exactly what Spider-Man 3 is all about. That just shows you that you need to let an artist be an artist. You know what he was supposed to do for Spider-Man 4? I wanted two things. I wanted to see John Malkovich as the Vulture. He was going to do it. And then he was going to have Bruce Campbell's Mysterio. What better choice?
No,
I mean,
that's
Jake
insane.
Gyllenhaal was good, but I mean, if you look at the actual character Mysterio, he's a failed effects artist,
Right.
Hollywood effects artist. Bruce Campbell's perfect for that.
Totally.
So it's like, man, if they would have made Spider-Man 4, like and I love Michael Keaton. He'll always be Batman to me, but man, Malkovich would have been a great Vulture.
Yeah. Man.
How long does this usually do? These usually
it goes sometimes short, sometimes pretty long.
He's one of the longest not interviewed, but at least anything I've recorded in a while.
Well, I mean,
because I've done, it's cool, like being a horror filmmaker. I've been on plenty of horror podcasts, and most of the time I usually call in, so I'm sitting there in my underwear talking about horror movies.
It's weird, man, and that was like a big part of me wanting to do this because I didn't want it to be like everything else.
Yeah,
I being a wrestler for so long, I'd been asked to be on so many podcasts, and I'd been on a lot of podcasts just calling in, and they asked me the same questions and don't listen to my answers. And it's like, do you even care? Like, what's going on here?
I think Mark said something about, why are you traveling that far to go on? Why don't you just call in? I'm like, well, he didn't ask me to call in. He asked me to come over.
Right, because I want it to be a hangout and not a.
And that's how you approached it when you hit me up. You said you should come on and hang out and we'll record a podcast.
Right. That's what it is. It's not an interview. We're just hanging out, and we happen to have a bunch of cool stuff that we have in common that we can talk about. We know a lot of the same people, and we have a lot of very similar goals. We're very like-minded, and I appreciate that, man. I want to continue to build off of that.
Mm-hmm. It's funny too, because I even forget sometimes how involved I've gotten in wrestling, even though I'm still not a wrestler. And I gotta say, Mark is huge on that too, because Mark is one of the biggest wrestling fans.
You know Rocky.
It's funny. I was gonna bring that up. Rocky is also in the web series,
right?
And I write for his magazine sometimes.
I do too.
Yeah,
I do online articles, like reviews. I just did one for Room for Rent.
I think I was just Googling that movie last night.
Like Lynn, what the hell's her last name? Lynn Shane was she was Miss Nuka Board in Dumb and Dumber.
Yeah. I wrote an article recently for Groove Monkey about the worst trailer I've ever seen, was for the film Mandela Effect. And I thought it would be cool to write a review of the trailer and then watch the movie and write a review of the movie. So it was basically, I said, here, let me talk about this. I said, all right, I'm going to stop now. I'm going to watch the movie. And then I watched the movie and talked about it. So it's something different I like. And Rocky, he pretty much, I hit him up, be like, dude, I want to publish something. He goes, go ahead. Like he pretty much lets me do whatever I want.
Right. Yeah.
And that's, and it's funny too, because I was going to mention Rocky because I already have two wrestlers on going to be in the web series, and that's, Nick and Rocky.
Right.
But Rocky, it's funny. I wrote the part specifically for him.
Right.
So I decided to make his character the world's most likable Satanist, because Rocky is just such a likable guy.
Yeah.
It's funny because Helter Skelter is such a different character than who he really is, because he's just such a charismatic, sweet, kind, real nice guy.
Him and I used to have conversations, and this is going back
probably real quick. That day I was shemping
10+ years.
I talked about one of the characters I shemped for was Helter Skelter.
Break down the word shemping.
Stand in.
Yeah, I don't know why is it?
Why is it shemping?
Why is it shemping? Yeah.
Because on Three Stooges.
That's what I assumed.
Yeah, it was Sam Raimi created this term, but it was, I think it was Shemp was the replacement for Curly, and he was always having heart attacks, so they would have to have stand-ins for him whenever that would happen. So they had to have the Shemps, and then Sam Raimi was the one who pretty much created that as a film term.
Cool. But yeah, my conversation, going back to what my conversation was with Rocky, was like, dude, people took advantage of him a lot in wrestling, and I always felt bad for him for it. Like promoters would have Rocky pay talent to come in, so they would work him. He would pay them.
I remember hearing these stories.
They would beat him up. Like they would hurt him. He wasn't a talented wrestler ever. But he would have to have matches with people, and he was not trained right, or
Well, he was the guy who would have to. I mean, he had to bleed.
he wanted to bleed.
Yeah.
So he would let them like beat him up. It just was sad to see from my end. And that's why, like,
Did he train at Monster Factory?
No.
Because he told me about Monster Factory. I wasn't sure if that was where he trained.
No. I think it had something to do with Pro Wrestling Unplugged. But I'm not sure. But I knew he was like high school friends with Trent Acid. And so there was a connection in there, and you know, Trent just kind of showed him a few things, or something like that. Please don't quote me, because I don't know.
You know, once again, talking about like big wrestlers, like, you know, WWE wrestlers, every one of these guys that's been in Mark's movies, he's gotten through Rocky. You know, like Nikolai Volkov and King Kong Bundy, and I believe Jimmy Snuka. Because you know, because I know Mark always wanted to be Rocky's manager, because he was going to be my manager when I was going to wrestle.
Right.
Because I know I think Rocky's managing now, right? He just did his retirement show.
Yeah. He told Johnny Ova is maybe the kid's name. He sent me videos or whatever. I didn't check him out. I'm kind of a dick with that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, oh, cool, thanks. Like, I'll check it out later.
And it's obviously, you know, who I met Rocky through is Mark.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, love the guy. Always had a special place in my heart for Helter. Have a special place in my heart for Mark. I'm pretty sure Mark's like doing stuff with wrestling now. Like, he's like filming for CZW shows.
Echo. Because, you know, Echo, it was funny how that all happened, because I brought Echo on board of Daisy Durkins, because we had somebody drop out last minute and we had to reshoot scenes and everything. So I found her when I put up a casting call on Facebook. I cast the role in like a half an hour. It's funny. So she came by. She literally went to Chikara because she was training again because her ankle was healed. So she went to Chikara, came over to film with us, met DJ, started training at CZW, and then she ended up getting Mark the gig to start filming for CZW. It's funny, like everything always comes full circle.
Cyclical, man. It's crazy.
And I believe Nick Burke was the one who got us CZW to film at, because Nick has been with CZW for years.
Well, he was
one of the first champions, wasn't he?
He was their heavyweight champion at one point.
Yeah, I don't know if he was the first or one of the first or something. I remember reading.
He's been there since 1999. I mean, before CZW was ever a blip on anyone's radar, Nick Burke was there. He doing the softcore Nick Burke. It was so good. The softcore connection, all that, and he told some really great stories about that on this podcast and on the wrestling podcast that we do. Another person holds a really dear place in my heart, Nick Burke. We've talked about him enough on this podcast.
I would say too, you know, he was definitely my mentor while I was trying to pursue the wrestling. Because someone, I mean, like I said, I've always been a fan, someone I've always looked up to. So it was, you know, I think it's a very cool thing to be able to consider him a friend, someone I used to watch on TV, and now we're friends and we're working together. Yeah, we have great on-screen chemistry on Daisy Durkins 3, and I can't wait to have, you know, I get to direct him in the web series.
Well, I'm excited. I'm excited to see where it goes, and excited to see where it's headed.
Now I got you got you, Rocky, and Nick all involved now. It's pretty cool. You know, it's funny. I even talked to Gabby Ortiz because we've been talking about working together. She was interested in working on Daisy Durkins. Right.
Well, I know Gio, and she managed him before. Right?
Yeah.
That's like her boyfriend, right?
Yeah. I know you're talking about, because I've seen that they met. I think they kind of have been the valet for each other, right?
Okay. And Shaheen, you know, she would manage their tag team. They were Coast to Coast and Ring of Honor.
Because I had a few people recommend her. Rocky was one of them to but I don't know. I sent her the script. I even told her about changing the character to be a wrestler instead of a pop star. So I don't know if she is still interested. I know I don't blame her for not wanting to do a role if it's not really involved in wrestling or
Well,
stunts or
you
anything.
know, she's kind of making a name for herself at this point. So I mean, let her go and figure out where she's going with that.
But I do, when the time comes, I do have a wrestling film I started writing.
Mhm.
So if it comes to the point, you know, all my wrestling connections will definitely come together, and I'll also play a wrestler in the film. So, you know, it'll make everything worth it if I ever end up making this project. But I got a web series to make, so I got to focus on that first. Who knows? I could be doing this for 5 years. You know, who knows how long I'll be working on the web series.
I always like to close episodes out by just telling everybody, and you know, especially you,
dude, how much it up for 40 minutes?
How much the currency of attention is. Like when they say pay attention, the currency of your attention and your effort, dude. To listen to something like this for that long takes a lot of effort.
Subscribe to my YouTube channel.
So anybody who's like stuck with me for an episode and likes it and likes the feel of it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Maybe go back and check out the other 161 episodes. Maybe you know some of the other guests, maybe not. What's real cool is, you know, I got to have really cool episodes that are on the records with one of my friends who's passed away, and that episode means so much to me now. So, you know, go back and check out my episodes. I have 2 episodes with Chris Cotton. And man, that what a blast. What a blast I've been having in the last 4 years I've been doing this. 3 years, something like that. It's dude, this is my favorite thing I've ever done. So stick with me. Keep evolving. Keep evolving along with me. And thanks so much for your attention. Thanks so much for hanging with me, Bob.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody else.
Do I hit the bongo again?
If you want.
Here's me entering. I'm exiting the trip now. This is a cool one.